Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching a movie on what if neglected Naruto has Kyuubi's son sealed inside of him. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Hai no Kuni, Konohagakure no Sato 7 years following the attack on Kyuubi no Kitsune. In the ninja village of Konoha, also called the Hidden Leaf Village, it was early autumn. This village was well known for its strong shinobi, its location amidst a forest of trees, and the generosity of its residents. The Senju brothers, Hashirama and Tobirama, the first and second Hokage, respectively, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, and the sensei of the legendary Sannin, also referred to as the god of shinobi, were among the numerous outstanding shinobi that came from it. The fourth and current Hokage, Minato Namikaze, was dubbed the Yellow Flash because of his Hiraishin no Jutsu. Other ninja, like Kakashi Hatake, Jiraiya the Toad Sage, Tsunade Senju, Asuma Sarutobi, and others, were equally well known despite not being Hokage. Among the top 5 shinobi villages in the entire elemental countries, Konoha is ranked first, Kumo, Iwa, and Suna are in second, third, and fourth, respectively, while Kiri, which is currently engaged in a civil war, is ranked fifth. However, after being torn from its host, Kushina Uzumaki, formerly of Uzushigakure, who was giving, Konoha was nearly destroyed on October 10 when the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked the village. Under the influence of a masked man, the fox went on a rampage, killing the midwives, breaking through an S-rank barrier jutsu, and taking one of the twin children hostage. In the process, the fox managed to kill the elite Anbu security detail. After saving his wife and kids, Minato Namikaze fought the masked man and injured him before giving up control of the Kyuubi and driving the intruder away. Later, when the fox was still out of control, Minato was forced to make the hardest and most painful choice of his life: resealing the 9 tails into one of his twin children. He considered this for a minute, and since time was running out, he made the decision to seal the Kyuubi into Shinri, his daughter. However, the village was still being devastated by massive amounts of the Kyuubi's chakra. He chose to seal the extra chakra into his son Naruto because he knew he couldn't risk breaking Shinri's seal and the fox might emerge, putting together a fake Jinchuriki. By some miracle, Minato and his spouse made it through the ordeal, and both parents were delighted to see their kids. Naturally, they now had to deal with the most important query from the village council, the elders, and the villagers. Who is the Kyuubi's container? The couple initially intended to tell them the truth, but they were aware of the death and devastation brought about by the Kyuubi's rampage, and they knew that the elders and the villagers would stop at nothing to make the Jinchuriki miserable. Then there was the terrible idea of their young daughter being raped and tortured. With a heavy heart, they declared Naruto to be the Jinchuriki, knowing that their son would lead a good life without many friends. They were afraid of the responses, as the village council and elders, excluding the shinobi clans and the Uchiha head, demanded that the young boy be killed or turned into a weapon. It was here that Kushina Uzumaki and the 4th Hokage destroyed Konoha's reputation. Both attempts were instantly thwarted by Minato, who also declared that the elder generation was not allowed to inform the younger generation of Naruto's Jinchuriki status. Naturally, they still tried to hurt the young blonde in spite of this. Before Minato and Kushina made the decision to teach Shinri how to use the Kyuubi's chakra, the Uzumaki Namikaze family had lived in harmony for 4 years. They never provided Naruto with the same training, for whatever reason, and consistently turned down his requests. The neglect wasn't that bad at first, but it got worse and worse over time. Subsequently, Naruto's sister and parents further separated from their almost forgotten relative. Today we arrive at that point, where Kushina and Minato are training their daughter. 7-year-old Shinri Uzumaki. Namikaze shared her mother's red eyes and complexion. As she concentrated chakra into her hand, it started to spin and eventually took the shape of a revolving ball. "Yes, I did it. I finally did it," she exclaimed, delighted to have mastered the Rasengan, one of her father's signature jutsus. Proud of their daughter, the two parents grinned at her. "Nice work, Shinri-chan," replied Minato. "Keep this up and you'll be able to become a great ninja like me and your mother." As her parents walked by and gave her a hug or a peck on the cheek, Shinri grinned. Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze, a boy of the same age as his sister and with red, tipped hair that resembled his father's, including the bangs, was watching this from the top of a tree. The rest of his face resembled his father's, but his eyes were the same color and shape as his mother's. He was dressed in black trousers, black sandals, and a green hooded sweatshirt that was unzipped over a mesh shirt. All the little boy could do was watch with sadness, wishing he could have been there for that family moment. Unfortunately, he wasn't, since they neglected his younger sister, who was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, as the rest of the village didn't know. Since he possessed some of the fox's chakra, he repeatedly asked his parents if they could train him, but each time he was turned away. The last time didn't go well because his parents caught him doing a sophisticated chakra exercise and screamed at him, using a lot of offensive language that no child should ever hear from a parent. After receiving a reprimand, he was sent to his room, where he sobbed uncontrollably while curling up in a corner and asking Kami why he was treated unfairly. But his suffering didn't stop at home. On a dozen occasions, the villagers tried to get up and harm him whenever he left the house, or they would spit at him, glare at him, or insult him. This occurred as a result of his father formally announcing Naruto as the fox's Jinchuriki, a fact for which the man detested himself. At that, Naruto sighed. He may not have been the fox's container, but he did, in fact, contain a Biju. You see, Minato, Kushina, and everyone else in Konoha didn't anticipate that the fox's excess chakra would truly transform into a completely different entity. In response to Naruto's desire for love and attention from his family, this entity became his first and only friend. Naruto remembered how he had met his friend and grinned softly. After receiving a harsh reprimand from his parents, he passed out and entered his mindscape while sobbing in a corner. Rewind to 1.5 years ago, the mindscape of Naruto. When Naruto awoke, he was in a forest with trees that appeared to be as tall as 10-story structures. The trees were rusty red in color, with green on the branches, and they were far too high for him to reach. Stunned, Naruto squeezed himself to check if he was dreaming, but when he sensed it, he was startled. Whoa! This is truly strange. He pondered this while scanning the area to see if anyone else was present. He heard birds singing as he strolled through the forest, and the sound soothed him. But then he heard a brand new, heartbreaking sound. Following the sound out of a childlike curiosity, Naruto soon discovered a small clearing where he saw a black and furry form curled up into a ball. Then he heard the whimpering sound once more, from the ball this time, and approached it cautiously. He knelt down as soon as he arrived and extended his hand to the whimpering ball. It was a wolf pup, and it jumped as soon as his fingertips touched it. The next thing it did, however, was shocking. The wolf pup said, "Ah, who are you?" which made me blink several times earlier. The blonde yelled, "Ah," as he leapt into the air and landed on his ass. "Why? You just talked," he exclaimed, gesturing to the dog, who gave him a mild rumble. "Of course I can talk. Got a problem with it?" Naruto continued to stare at the wolf pup, unsure of how to respond. He said to the wolf, "What are you, and why were you crying?" When he said, "Because I'm all alone," the pup's eyes appeared to sparkle with tears. "No one is here except me," he added. As Naruto slowly made his way back to the puppy, his heart ached. He inquired, "How long have you been here?" His words caused the blonde's eyes to widen in surprise. "Since after the day your father the excess chakra from the fox into you," he said. He asked, "How much do you know about the Kyuubi?" And the dog gave a little sniffle. "The chakra the fourth Hokage sealed in you also had his memories," said the wolf, "when he was created by the Rakudo Sennin, to the day he attacked your village. When that ninja sealed the chakra, what he didn't know was that it had gathered some of the first of your chakra, and the chakra of a wolf that happened to be passing through. Thus I was conceived." "Are you saying you're some sort of Biju?" Naruto asked, his eyes widening. "Sorta," said the wolf, "and when I was born, I found myself here. Alone. Without the love of a parent or anything." When the wolf pup began to cry once more, Naruto watched it with pity. This poor little man reminded him of himself, so he could somehow identify with him. He said, "Do you have a name?" And the dog shook his head. "No, since no one is here to give me one." The young dog was then taken aback by something Naruto did. The blonde hugged the wolf pup after picking it up. He caressed its fur and remarked, "I understand what it's like to be by yourself." "How would you know?" The dog replied, "You have your parents and your sister." "My family doesn't see me that way anymore," Naruto said, startling the wolf pup once more. "They all agreed I'm not worth their time. And so they excluded me as their family," he said, his eyes taking on a sorrowful expression. The dog remarked, "You seem to really dislike them." "No," said the blonde, shaking his head. "I don't hate them. In fact I love them all very much," said Naruto. "I just wish they see me as their son, brother, and not as a nuisance." The dog was so reassured by the boy's hug that it remained silent. As the puppy curled up in his arms, Naruto couldn't help but smile. The wolf pup nodded when he said, "You said you didn't have a name, right?" Then how about I give you one? He asked. The dog became excited at that. Why? You'd really do that? He stammered, but Naruto grinned broadly at him. His words, of course. Everybody needs a name, left the dog speechless. Now what to call you, he said. The blonde started to mentally list the names he knew until one struck him, making him smile. He said, Kiba. Yes, that sounds right, and the dog gave him an owly look. The now named wolf pup asked, Kiba? Naruto cast his gaze downward. Yeah, it means, hope that someday we'll be seen as family, Naruto replied. You like it? I like it, Kiba said with a look that Naruto assumed was the wolf equivalent of shyness. End of flashback. After reliving that memory, Naruto opened his eyes to see his family returning inside as night fell. A year and several months had passed since that day. Having a genuine connection with someone made him happy, even if the individual in question was a young Biju. Speaking of which, Kiba had developed significantly after it was discovered that he was absorbing chakra through the seal. Since he was essentially the fox's son, they estimated that he would reach 9 tails strength when Naruto is 12 years old. He was currently at 3 tails strength. Through their bond, the two also perfected the Biju cloak, in which Kiba's chakra was green rather than the fox's corrosive red and black. Even so, the pain was not as severe as the fox's. Then, through their telepathic connection, Kiba spoke, interrupting his thoughts. The wolf Biju asked, Are you certain it was a good idea not to leave them a note? 2 weeks ago, following another village attack. In order to train and prepare for the academy, the two have determined that they must find a hiding place. Naruto chose to do it covertly because, of course, there is a part of his family that is trying to stop him. If they notice that I'm gone or where I'm going to be living for the next few years, they'll send Anbu after me, Naruto said, with a sad thought. You know, you could have told them about me. Then they could have trained you along with your sister, said the wolf, who sighed at that. At that point, Naruto could only exhale, it doesn't matter. Furthermore, even if I did tell them, I doubt they would believe me. At that point, Kiba could only gaze sorrowfully at his container. The relationship between Naruto and his family was not going well. For fear of being scolded or punished, Naruto ceased communicating with them. Being aware that they would choose Shinri's option over his, he made no recommendations as to where they should go. He trained outside of the village because he believed it was best to remain silent. The Anbu and his family couldn't see or hear him. However, the villagers were now attacking him when he was only a few blocks from his house, growing increasingly brazen and ferocious. He was able to escape with only minor injuries. As Naruto put a backpack on his shoulders that contained only food rations, a few bottles of water, and some clothing, he said to his host, It's time for us to go. I'm still not privy about the place you picked for us to hide in, Kiba said, sounding uneasy. There's a reason why they call it the Forest of Death, you know. As he hopped from tree to tree, Naruto's face displayed a look of conviction. His words caused Kiba's eyes to narrow. Therefore, no one will be foolish enough to search for us in there. Kiba attempted to reason, but Naruto persisted. And why wouldn't they? That place is a virtual hellhole and death trap. Even the Anbu think twice before going in that accursed place. The wolf's mouth opened and closed like a gaping fish before he sighed. We're going in there, and that's final. He remarked, You're nuts. Seriously, you are, as Naruto laughed. It's who I am, Kiba, he replied. You should know that. That's what worries me, said the youthful Biju, with a deadpan expression. As he headed straight for their destination, Naruto just laughed. However, they were unaware that multiple blurs were pursuing them. Half an hour later, beyond the perimeter fence of Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death, Kiba remarked, I still think this a bad idea, as they reached the fence surrounding the notorious training ground. Are you a mouse or a wolf? That crazy snake girl who lives here is the only thing we need to be concerned about, Naruto stated. Since the animals are able to sense your chakra, they would probably leave us alone. The wolf continued, That doesn't mean that there are few animals in there who are bold enough to attack us. But before Naruto could respond, they both sensed chakra signatures approaching. Naruto concluded, Anbu, 4 of them, and that one of them is Neko, Oni, Chan. Kiba asked, You mean that pretty Anbu girl? And Naruto gave his surrogate brother a mental scowl. Naruto said, Now's not the time, Kiba, as the Anbu entered the area. One of them wore a white cat mask with red lines and had long purple hair. The Anbu said, Naruto, what are you doing out here? As Naruto continued to face the fence with a dejected expression on his face. To the woman's surprise, he said, "I'm sorry, Oni-chan, but I need to be away from the village and my family for a little while." Yugo Uzuki was aware that the villager was treating him badly and that his parents were ignoring him in favor of his sister. However, she was unaware of how bad it was. "Naruto, please listen to me," the captain of the Anbu said. "Whatever is happening at home between you and your family, you can talk to me about it. But for now, let's get you home." That word made Naruto's eyes sparkle with tears. He said, "Home. I wish that place did felt like home," which confused Yugo and the other members of her team. "But I guess I'm not wanted or needed there, since no one there wants to give me even an ounce of love," Yugo said. At this, Yugo's eyes enlarge. "Naruto, please, don't talk like that," she says. With a sorrowful smile, Naruto made a hand sign with his hands. "Sorry Chan," he replied, "but I need to do this. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." To the ANBU's astonishment, 7 flawless replicas of the young boy materialized in 7 puffs of smoke. One team member exclaimed in surprise, "Nani, Kage Bunshin," while the others responded in kind. "But he's not even in the academy yet. How can he know such an advanced jutsu?" Before turning to face the team, and Yugo in particular, Naruto rubbed his neck and said, "Well, I sorta broke into the vault where the forbidden scroll and copied the directions for the jutsu," laughing. "Tell mom and dad I don't hate them, Oni-chan. And tell them I don't Shinri. Tell them, despite everything they did, I still love them," he said. Naruto and the clones then leapt into the forest with a chakra-infused leap. While Yugo bit a curse, knowing that one of the best uses for the Kage Bunshin was to use them to divert any pursuers from the original's trail, the final member yelled, "Shit! What do we do?" She directed one of her subordinates, saying, "Go get Tenzo and another team. While you're there, look for Ankoa, she knows this place better than anyone." She turned to face the other two as the other Anbu nodded and took off. "You two follow him inside, double back and try a different trail if the one you're on is a fake. But that place is infested with monstrous animals, bugs, and who knows what else is in there," said the 2 Anbu, who were taken aback. Before sensing that they were the target of murderous intent, one of them uttered those words. Her growl made them tremble a little. "Get in there, or I will slice off your legs and leave you two for the predators in that forest to feast on," she said. However, what will you do?" the second one said, and he vowed to have seen the female ANBU's eyes narrow. "I will notify the Hokage," she declared. "Now proceed." As the two cautiously made their way into the forbidden training ground, Yugo instantly pivoted on her heel and made her way directly to the Uzumaki Namikaze residence. In the meantime, at the specified place while preparing dinner for the rest of her family in the kitchen, Kushina Uzumaki thought about her only son, Naruto. A sad expression came to her face as she recalled how she and Minato had neglected him in favor of their daughter, even yelling at him after performing the advanced chakra exercise known as water walking. He had undoubtedly been scared, perplexed, and hurt by the harsh words and tone she and her husband used, and she didn't even realize it until he had run away with a terrified and scared expression on his face. She went to his room that evening because she wanted to apologize, but what she saw when she walked in made her regret what she had done even more. Rewind. Naruto's room. As Kushina approached the door leading to her son's bedroom, she slowly turned the knob and opened it. Upon entering, she saw that Naruto was not on the bed and panicked, thinking he had fled, until she noticed his mop of blonde hair on the opposite side. She froze and her eyes glistened with unshed hair when she saw her young son sitting against the wall, his legs curled up and his arms tightly wrapped around them, seemingly anticipating a blow. The former Uzushio native muttered, "Naruto," as she knelt down and cautiously moved forward, reaching her hand forward and placing it gently on his shoulder. His lack of response indicated that he was sound asleep, so Kushina got up and drew back his bed's covers, then leaned down to pick him up without waking him and placed him gently on the mattress, taking off his sandals before covering him. She knelt and ran her fingers through his hair after noticing the tears on his face and feeling disgusted at herself and Minato for overreacting that afternoon. She said, "I'm sorry, Naruto," remaining silent to avoid waking him. "Your father and I didn't mean to react the way we did." At that, she shook her head. "No, we were just. No justification exists. But know that you are still loved and cared for. Additionally, I wouldn't let anything happen to you." Then she reached out and kissed her son's forehead. She said, "I'll discuss this with your father. If it's okay with you, we'll try to spend more time with you. Especially me," she said, getting to her feet as a single tear trickled down her cheek and a melancholy smile appeared on her face. "Good night, my little maelstrom," she declared. "I will always love you." She then left the room in silence and left her son to sleep. End of flashback. She has made an effort to be there for her son ever since that day, but he would always leave early in the morning and was rarely seen, and Shinri's training sessions took up a lot of her time. She had also spoken with Minato, who agreed that what they had done to their son was excessive. He also attempted to develop a closer relationship with Naruto, but the boy was simply too busy, and he also had to train Shinri. Nevertheless, they made a commitment to themselves that they would attempt to develop a closer relationship with their son as soon as they had more time. The arrival of her husband and daughter, the former being carried on his back because she had overtrained herself, interrupted her thoughts, and the red-haired woman merely sighed at her daughter's desire to gain strength. Once more. Who sighed? She asked Minato. Yep, he replied, and Shinri smiled sheepishly. The carbon copy of Kushina said, "Sorry Ka-chan," as Minato set her down on the floor. Despite being somewhat spoiled due to her parents' preference for her over her brother Naruto, Shinri wasn't as conceited or spoiled as most spoiled kids were. She helped clean up the house and occasionally tried to spend time with her brother but was unsuccessful because he would always disappear. Kushina also noticed that Shinri was sad for Naruto when he was yelled at last year, but she was also a little jealous of him because of the freedom he had gained. She grinned, pleased that her young daughter was not a conceited Uchiha, not to disparage her best friend Mikoto or her oldest son Itachi. "It's all right, Shinri," she replied. "Why don't you go upstairs and get Naruto? Dinner's almost ready." Minato sighed as he took his place at the table, and Shinri, full of energy, ran up the stairs. When he said, "I don't know where she gets the sudden surge of energy," excluding the Kyuubi, Kushina laughed. She remarked, "You forget, Minato, that my clanfolk are only tired for a minute, then feel great the next," as Minato's head sagged forward. His wife chuckled as he complained, "Curse your longevity," and then she turned back to check on the food, only to be interrupted by a series of desperate and urgent knocks on the door. "Hokage. Sama. Sensei. Get the door open," shouted the familiar voice of Kushina's student Yugo, and by the sound of it, it was panicked. "It's important, get out." After shutting off the stove and oven, Kushina and Minato started to go to the door, but Shinri quickly descended with a terrified expression on her face. "Ka-san. Hey-san. Naruto isn't in his chamber." As the knocking persisted, she said, and the two parents started to worry. "Sensei. Fucking open the door." Yugo yelled once more, and this time Kushina approached and opened the door, revealing her student wearing her Anbu gear and uniform, her mask off, and an angry, urgent expression on her face. "Yugo. What's the matter?" she inquired. When the purple-haired woman said, "It's Naruto," the mother and the rest of the family became extremely concerned. "What took place?" she said. "Where is he?" "He entered the 44th training ground." The house was silent when he said that, until... "What?" When that training ground was mentioned, Kushina and Minato both screamed, their eyes wide with horror. "The Death Forest? How come he's in there?" "Now afraid for his son," said the Hokage. The Anbu said, with signs of anger on her face. He felt he was unwanted, and he decided the best way to make you all happy was to leave. But he said, that despite all the neglect, he still loved you all, she said. Naruto's sister and parents were taken aback by those remarks. Kushina thought, unwanted? Naruto, you really think we didn't want you? As her student went on, and that's not all, she was startled out of her reverie. It seems that the village has been attacking him with increasing boldness. At that, Kushina's head jerked up. Attacked, she said, and Minato was equally taken aback. Although he was aware of the villagers' strong animosity toward his son, he didn't anticipate an attack. When he realized what a fool he truly was, his fists clenched. Yes, attacked, Yugo replied, and none of you didn't even notice. Just as Kushina opened her mouth to respond, Minato touched her shoulder. The fourth Hokage remarked, we need to concentrate on Naruto right now, so this isn't the time to argue, Kushina. Despite his desire to respond, Kushina nodded and approached Shinri. My Shoujo, she said, your brother will be picked up by your father and me traveling with Yugo. Nichan. I want to remain here and secure every window and door. Please don't let anyone in or out. As Kushina, Shinri nodded and went to her in Minato's room. She returned wearing her Jonin uniform, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, her road to ninja outfit. She said, let's go, and Minato followed her out the door, closing it behind them. Now that she was by herself, Shinri glanced out the closest window to see Yugo and her parents running down the street. Oni-san, please be alright, alongside Naruto. As he made his way through the enormous trees of the notorious Forest of Death, Naruto was hopping from branch to branch, and he had yet to encounter any of the terrifying creatures he had heard about. Unaware that they were following a ruse, the Anbu that had been pursuing him each pursued one of his cage bunshin. Naruto remarked, "Well, at least my decoys have them going the wrong way," while Kiba merely sighed. The wolf responded, "Yeah, that worked at least," but added, "The animals and the snake lady are now our main concerns. It's getting late, and even though you're an Uzumaki, you still need to find somewhere to spend the night, and I recommend somewhere up a tree." "No, too obvious," said Naruto, shaking his head. "We need to find someplace where it will be easy to hide and harder for them to find," he said. Kiba sighed, but his animal senses made him stiffen before he could make more than a blink. Naruto. "Hold on." The Jinchuriki followed the wolf's instructions. "What is it?" Concerned by his friend's lack of response, Naruto said. "We're being watched, and it's not Anbu or any other Konoha ninja," Kiba said, expressing great alarm. "I just smelled you. Although it's a wolf, it's distinct." At that, Naruto blinked. "How different? It smells strong, old," Kiba growled slightly. His eyes widened as he said, "Prehistoric, and they've surrounded us. At least 10 or 20 of them are odorous to me." Naruto's eyes widened as he drew a kunai, listening and scanning his surroundings. After a half minute, he heard growls and snarls, and then at least 24 wolves emerged from the shadows, but these wolves were different from the ones Naruto had read about because they appeared larger and more powerful. They weighed between 110 and 175 pounds, were nearly 5 feet long, and had fur that was the same color as that of regular wolves, but with a stripe of spinal bone running down the back. The anxious boy, who was perspiring profusely, was then surrounded by the wolves. "Hey, Kiba," he said to his surrogate brother, "would you be able to communicate with them if I allowed you to take over my body?" "I don't know. These guys are a different breed than what I'm familiar with. I can tell just by the smell," said the apprehensive wolf, but before Naruto could react, they heard a sharp howl from the alleged pack leader, who was slightly larger than the others and had a full white fur coat. His yellow eyes were piercing his own. As the wolf started to move toward Naruto, he remarked, "Oh man, this doesn't look good." As his container blinked, Kiba said, "Naruto, kneel down. If I can tell by the scent, that's the matriarch of the pack. Kneel down, or she'll attack you." To avoid being mauled to death by the she-wolf, Naruto heeded Kiba's advice and knelt down. After approaching further, the wolf came to a halt in front of Naruto and started sniffing him from head to toe. "This is getting weird, okay," Naruto thought uneasily. The wolf kept sniffing before its eyes widened and it started to back away. "Just relax," Kiba said. Nervous and perplexed by the she-wolf's behavior, Naruto's eyes blinked. "Well, what comes next?" The wolf then turned and appeared to glare at the other wolves, causing them to retreat and return to the forest, he thought. Then, as if to signal him to follow her, the female wolf turned to face Naruto and startled him by jerking her to the side. "What ought we to do?" Kiba just shrugged, the young blonde thought. The Zon of the Kyuubi said, "We got nothing better to do, let's follow her," and Naruto reluctantly started to follow the white she-wolf. In the meantime, in a different area of the forest, an irate and frantic voice yelled, "Get the hell out of my way," as a giant mantis with its head severed fell to the ground. As she sliced through numerous ferocious creatures in the Forest of Death that were stupid enough to obstruct her path, the voice belonged to none other than Kushina Uzumaki. Her husband, Yugo, a few other Anbu, and Anko Midarashi, the sole resident of the training grounds, trailed behind her. They remained behind while Kushina used a sword that was borrowed from one of the Anbu to cut, chop, or use any kind of jutsu on the poor, unfortunate creatures. With a faint trace of fear, Anko remarked, "Oh man, I know I can be sadist, but even I know not to mess with a mother, who is a strong S-rank kunoichi by the way," as she saw Kushina beat a giant bear's skull in when it attempted to swipe at her. Given his wife's condition, Minato could only watch in concern. He understood that she was as desperate as he was to find Naruto. However, he could also see that she had expended a lot of her chakra and was beginning to feel tired. She would harm herself unless he took action. He yelled, "Kushina, please stop, we have to go back," as he watched her use her chakra chains to strangle another mantis before slamming it to the ground and turning back to face them angrily. She backhanded a large green lizard that was about to attack her in the face, causing the reptile to fall to the ground and go squirmy-eyed. "I'm not leaving Naruto out here in this damn place. I'd rather rot in hell than go back without him," she argued. "I want him back as much as you do," replied Minato, but with you overusing your chakra, and in your current condition, you could end up killing yourself. As she continued forward, Kushina was only able to narrow her eyes. By this point, every creature was hiding in terror from the red-haired woman's fury. She gasped as she felt a chop to the back of her neck, her senses not warning because she was focused on getting her son back, and she fell to the ground unconscious. "You all can go back if you want, but I'm no she said. Yugo sighed and turned to Minato, who was walking over and picking his unconscious wife off the ground with a solemn expression on his face. "I'm sorry, sensei, but for Naruto and Shinri's sake, I have to stop you," Yugo said. "Come on everyone," he replied, "we'll continue looking for Naruto in the morning." The group of shinobi then left the area and disappeared. This was Minato's final thought. "Naruto, be careful, Naruto is back." Naruto continued to follow the wolf while yawning. He was exhausted and it was past his bedtime. "How much more do we have to go, man?" As they walked on, he thought, "I can hardly keep my eyes open." "Just hang on for a little longer, Naruto," Kiba said. "I have a feeling we don't have to wait much longer." Naruto rubbed his eye and remained silent. 10 more minutes passed before the wolf halted between two trees and let out a howl that startled Naruto out of his half-sleep stroll and forced him to run in the direction of the wolf's location. His eyes widened upon arriving at what appeared to be a collection of buildings encircled by a substantial wall. But because of the tall grass and the vines growing on the walls, it appeared to have been abandoned for a while. However, he was also taken aback to discover that there were at least dozens of wolves residing outside the walls. He remarked, "Well, this is something new." Before the wolf pushed him forward and he carried on walking forward with the wolf in tow. Their matriarch followed, and the other wolves gave him a curious look. As they passed through the gate of the expansive compound, the blonde thought, "I have a bad feeling about this." Kiba said, "You're not the only one," as they made their way down the street in the direction of what appeared to be the main building. It resembled the Hokage Tower in scale, but it was stone gray in color and had some vines growing over it. He noticed 2 wolves on guard, and when he stopped and was pushed by the wolf once more, the guard wolves sprang to attention and started to growl menacingly. The 2 guards dropped to their feet as the matriarch stepped forward and let out a series of tiny growls and barks. The wolf then turned to face Naruto, and to his surprise, it started talking. The wolf said, "Inside human," in a distinctly female voice, but it was telepathic because its mouth remained motionless. The wolf nodded as the blonde asked, "Why, you can talk?" "Only through thoughts," the wolf said, "and I heard every word you've spoken to your tenant since I first saw you." At that, Naruto's eyes widened, but before he could say anything more, the wolf instructed him to enter the building once more, promising to explain later. Naruto entered the building because he had no other option and didn't want to annoy the wolf. The wolf guided him through what appeared to be a home's living room before coming to a flight of stairs. They climbed them and came to a bedroom with a bed and everything, in reasonably good shape. The white wolf repeated, "Get some rest, child. When you meet the alpha of our pack tomorrow, all of your questions will be answered." Then she turned, but Naruto stopped her before she could leave. The wolf turned back to face him and responded, "Wait, can you please, at least, tell me what your name is?" As the wolf said, "It's Shikan, now, rest." Shikan then left the boy in the room by himself. With a sigh, Naruto removed his backpack, laid down beside the bed, and sat down, noticing how comfortable it was. As he lay on the bed, he remarked, "Man, I was not expecting this, Kiba." "I know, bro," Kiba said, "but for now, let's sleep. We'll find out more in the morning." After nodding, Naruto sat up, grabbed his backpack, and placed it on his lap after remembering something. After opening it, he started searching through the contents until he located what he was looking for and took it out. It was a photo of his family taken prior to Shinri and him turning 5. One of the few instances in which the entire family was equally content. Then he set the framed picture on the little chest beside the bed's head. As he considered whether he had made the right decision, a single tear fell from his eye. Naruto chose not to think about it tonight, so he took the bed's covers, pulled them over his head, and went to sleep. When Kushina's eyes opened, she realized that she was back in her family's living room. The odd thing is that everything was in black and white, but she was the only one who was normal. With a look of complete shock on her face, the bewildered woman glanced at her hands. What's happening? Where am I? She thought to herself, but as she started to hear voices, her thoughts were interrupted. She recognized one right away as Minato's, and the other as her own. Additionally, they appeared to be shouting at someone. When she saw the calendar in the kitchen, her heart fell, and she rushed there as her eyes widened. This date was all too familiar to her. No, don't do that again, please. Never again. As the yelling outside grew louder, she let out a scream inside. After that, she ran to the back and opened it, only to be shocked and horrified to see herself, Minato, and Naruto in the backyard. Naruto was crying, his whiskered cheeks showing fear. The past Minato screamed at Naruto, "You stupid little bastard. What were you thinking using an advanced chakra exercise without our permission?" The younger blonde said, But San. Aye. But the past Kushina gave her a hard slap in response. The past Kushina screamed, "That's enough out of you. I can't believe a little shit like you would try to pull a stunt like this." The present Kushina winced at the words, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No. Put an end to this. Stop. Please." She pleaded with any god in the world to put an end to this torture, but it was in vain as the two ghosts of her and her husband kept yelling at Naruto, who was now sobbing while curled up in a ball. Then, to her dismay and anxiety, a menacing smile appeared on her and Minato's lips. The past Kushina stated, "It's clear that this little shit stain is not cooperating," and the past Minato gave a nod of agreement. The real Kushina watched, obviously perplexed by this. "Yes, and we know what happens to incooperative brats," he said. As past Minato produced one of his Hiraishin kunai, Kushina thought, Wait? What's going on? This is not right. We sent Naruto to his room. And nobody would give a damn. He said, they'll see this as a blessing rather than a murder because the entire village already hates him. Kushina's eyes widened in horror. Her alleged past self used her chakra chains to strung Naruto up by the neck, spreading his arms and legs wide, his face now displaying genuine fear as he gazed at them, before she could even think. Naruto pleaded, Chan. T2. Chan. Please. But their smiles only grew wider. I apologize, Naru. Chan. We didn't want you, though. The other Kushina said in a sickly sweet voice, Shinri is our favorite, and we could always make her a new little brother. Then, with another chakra chain emerging from her back, the kunai tip sped at the 6-year-old, striking him in the shin, causing the young boy to scream in agony. This was obviously not what happened, and the real Kushina stared in horror at what had just transpired. This isn't what happened. This is all wrong, the Uzumaki yelled at herself. After that, she witnessed Minato throw his trademark kunai behind Naruto, vanish in a flash of yellow, and then reappear behind Naruto holding a recognizable spiraling ball of chakra. Rasengan. The boy cried out in pain as Minato slammed the chakra ball into Naruto's back. No, quit. Kushina screamed as she tried to help her son, only for something to grab her ankle. She looked down and saw what looked like a black vine wrapped around it. She reached for her kunai pouch, but was shocked to find it not there on her thigh. Desperation taking hold as she clawed at it, trying to get free to save her child from this torture. Let go of me. Panic set in as the red habanero now struggled more than ever to reach Naruto, but then another black vine grabbed her wrist and yanked it back. She heard another scream and turned back, her eyes widening as another chakra chain impaled itself into Naruto's other shin, followed by two more to his forearms. Then, just as the past Minato did, Kushina saw the past Kushina change into a hideous version of herself, with her skin horribly burned, her red hair in a greasy mess, her teeth sharpened to a pin point, and her eyes a bloodshot demon's yellow. Two ninjutsu swords then emerged from the ground, their blades old and rusted. Now for the finishing touch, exclaimed the now demon Kushina, as she grasped the sword and pulled the blade from the earth, followed by the demon Minato. Indeed, it's time to put this troublesome dog to sleep for good. After that, he plunged the blade into Naruto's stomach, causing the young blonde to let out a strangled cry of agony. The demon Kushina then skipped over to the boy who was chained. As she watched the real one struggle, the ugly Kushina exclaimed, Oh Naru. Chan, Naru. Chan. Adding, if only you'd been a good boy, you wouldn't be having this punishment. As this thing spoke to her son, Kushina could only growl, but what the demon Kushina said next chilled her to the bone. The ugly Kushina pushed the ninjutsu into Naruto's neck and said, Now, you die, causing the boy to choke on his blood and lose consciousness. As Kushina witnessed the death of her beloved child in front of her, her horror was evident on her face. No, she screamed as Naruto struck the ground and the ugly versions of herself and Minato, the vines, and the chakra chains disappeared. The distraught mother hurried over to her son right away and gathered him in her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks as she gazed at his tiny, motionless body and the pitch black surroundings. Naruto? Naruto. The mother saw no reaction and rocked back and forth while holding her son's body as Kushina wailed and attempted to wake him, but to no avail, as his eyes were rolled back and lifeless. As she said, "Naruto. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," she was in pure desperation. Kushina jerked her head up and looked around when a small voice rasped out, "Why?" only to hear her supposed dead child breathing raspily. She looked down at Naruto, and her eyes widened in horror as she saw his face, with thicker whisker marks, 2 fangs coming from his mouth, and eyes that were a demonic red with a black pitless slitted pupil. "Why do you despise me?" Kushina woke up with a scream, her clothes soaked and her entire body covered in sweat, and she realized she was in the family's master bedroom. Recalling the terrible nightmare she had, she cowered against the head of the bed as the door flew open and a worried Minato appeared. "Kushina. Are you okay?" As you go, 2 other individuals, Hiruzen Sarutobi and another Anbu wearing a shrew mask, watched Minato make his way to his wife, who appeared to have seen the devil himself, the 4th Hokage said in concern. "Kushina." Minato put a gentle hand on her shoulder and said, "Kushina, talk to me." She jerked her head up and backpedaled against the wall as a result. "Kushina, please relax, it's me," Minato remarked as he approached his wife, which seemed to frighten her even more. Realizing he needed to act quickly, he advanced and seized the visibly upset Uzumaki, who started to struggle greatly. The blonde calmly said, "Shush, Kushina, shush," and repeated the process until she calmed down. She then hugged her husband and started crying, saying, "It's okay, Kushina. Tell me what happened now." As she recalled the terrible nightmare, Kushina could not stop crying. C.can, T. I.it was S.so. Horrible. Minato turned to face the other Anbu as she spoke in between sobs. "Get Inoichi right away. Inform him immediately that I need him and that this is an emergency." The Anbu nodded and disappeared in a shunshin when the Yondaime gave the order. Shinri entered at this point, worried about her mother. She started to say something, but Hiruzen interrupted and shook his head. "Your mother just had a nightmare, Shinri-chan," the retired Hokage replied. "It would be best if you didn't disturb her right now." Yugo stayed and stared at the sensei who was being comforted by Minato, wondering what the nightmare was but also having a good suspicion as to what, or who, it was about. Shinri wanted to protest this, but she knew she wouldn't win in an argument, so she just nodded and went with the Sandaime. When Inoichi arrived 20 minutes later and saw the condition of the former Jinchuriki, he realized right away that something was wrong. "Hokage. Sama." The Yamanaka clan head walked up to the couple and said, "I came as soon as I was informed by the Anbu." As he held his wife, Minato remarked, "And a good thing you did, Inoichi," adding that Kushina had a nightmare. "And I can only assume that it was a terrifying experience for her based on how she woke up." Looking at the sobbing Uzumaki as she repeatedly uttered her son's name, Inoichi nodded. He nodded his head, fully aware of the Hokage's request. "And you want me to use my mind transfer jutsu to see what her nightmare was," he said. He turned to Kushina and said, "Yes, I need to know what it was about," to which his fellow blonde nodded. When Inoichi said, "Kushina, listen to me," the woman raised her head to show her red, puffy eyes and tear-streaked face. "I know you just woke up from a nightmare, but I need to go into your mind and find out what it was," Inoichi said. "Please calm down so I can finish this." Minato got up and gave the two some room, while Kushina reluctantly nodded her head. Inoichi brought a chair to the side of the bed, then raised his hands in the jutsu's signature hand sign before going limp and entering Kushina's head, which made the woman go limp as well. 15 minutes later, Inoichi and Kushina awoke with a start, the latter's expression displaying horror and shock. He put his hand on his head to help him forget the hell he had just witnessed. "Kami, have mercy," he said. "What is it, Inoichi?" Concerned, Minato assisted his wife in sitting up again. The head of the Yamanaka clan could only stare at him with a pale face and trembling eyes due to what he saw. He said calmly but fearfully, "I can only say this, Minato, you wouldn't like what I saw in there." What was it that was so terrible that it terrified his normally courageous love half to death? Minato could only blink at that. He then approached the Yamanaka, who appeared to be about to throw up. He firmly said, "Let me see it," which caused Kushina and Inoichi to jerk their heads in his direction. "No, Minato. You shouldn't see it," Inoichi agreed with Kushina as she begged. "Believe in me and her, Minato. You'd rather not," as his fellow blonde nodded, he countered. Mintao said, "You're right, I don't want to." but then he looked resolute and said, I must. He narrowed his eyes and said, I am giving you an order, Inoichi, because whatever it was that scared Kushina so much, it surely worries Naruto. I want to see what you discovered in Kushina's head. Kushina worriedly glanced at her husband and said, Minato. He gestured for him to sit, but Inoichi was only able to blink at that. The head of the Yamanaka clan said, Don't say I didn't warn you, and then he described what he had witnessed in Kushina's nightmare. As soon as they were done, Inoichi saw the reaction they had anticipated. Minato went pale and then grabbed the closest trash can and threw up. He thought to himself, that was. I don't even know how to describe it, sweet Kami in heaven. The Hokage then got to his feet, moved over to the bed, and embraced his wife. He whispered in her ear, Listen to me, Kushina, what you and I saw in that nightmare wasn't us. That never happened, and it will never happen again. Before we ever harm one of our children, I would sooner kill you and myself. Particularly Naruto. As Yugo watched, Kushina only started crying harder when Minato turned to face Inoichi. Thank you, you can go home now, Inoichi, he said, and the man nodded before walking away. That nightmare scared 2S rank and 1A rank shinobi. What could it be? In the meantime, training ground 44 one particular blonde-haired Jinchuriki was still asleep when his door opened as morning broke over the forest of death, and 3 pairs of yellow eyes peered in and saw the human on the bed. Unaware that 3 figures were approaching him, Naruto stayed on the bed and, when they reached the foot of the bed, they squatted down and then, as one, jumped on the sleeping 7-year-old. The outcome was clear. Ah! Naruto screamed as he felt the weight of something furry, and smells like the forest, on him. What the? Hello? Leave me alone. 3 wolf pups, the same color as the other wolves he saw last night, were the 3 things that attacked him. One, however, had 2 white stripes that resembled claws on its shoulders, another had a brown circle around its eye, and the final one had eyes that were heterochromika, one brown, the other yellow. Come on, guys. Leave. Naruto yelled once more, and the pup with the heterochromic eyes then addressed him in a voice reminiscent of a young girl. Get up and at him, Shikan. Sama sent us to pick you up, the dog yelled, then grabbed him by the hand and pulled him from the bed. Ah! Release my hand. They led Naruto out of the main building, down the main road, and then turned left and left the small compound. The other wolves saw the amusing scene and Naruto thought he heard a few snickers. The blonde shouted again, but the young pup ignored him and continued to pull the young blonde out of the room, with the other wolf pups right behind. Shikan and 2 other wolves were outside the cave when the young pups brought the fugitive blonde in front of Shikan, who watched with a neutral expression. It took them a few minutes to reach a small hill with a cave opening large enough for a caravan to file into. I presume you had a good night's sleep, kid? Shikan spoke, and Naruto nodded as he rubbed his hand and gave the female pup who had pulled him all the way here a fierce look. He replied, Yeah, I did, but did you need to send your tiny goons to retrieve me? I swear I was afraid she would tear my hand off. The dog merely gave a naive glance. I was only doing what I was told, she said sweetly, and Shikan intervened before Naruto could respond. You'll have enough time to maul each other later, the she-wolf replied. For now, the alpha wishes to see you, child. At that, Naruto scowled. My name is Naruto, Yano, he said, and the she-wolf gave him a look. She replied, Of course, now, follow me, Naruto. Shikan responded after Naruto's eye twitched and he muttered, Geez, does she have to talk like a drone? When she said, I heard that, Naruto's spine tingled, and he became aware of a yawn in his head. As he stretched inside the mindscape, Kiba remarked, It would be best not to piss her off, Naruto, since she could rip us apart. Additionally, I would rather live for a long time after I get my 9th tail. You're not helping here, Naruto thought to himself as he followed the she-wolf into the cave, the 3 pups trailing, giving his companion a deadpan expression. Naruto wondered why they hadn't yet experienced complete cave darkness after they had been walking through the tunnel for 10 minutes, but before he could ask, he noticed light at the end of the tunnel, and soon the group of 4 wolves and 1 Jinchuriki arrived in what appeared to be a large cavern with a hole in the ceiling that let sunlight in. Naruto looked around and saw more wolves, who were observing him warily. Naruto thought, well, at least they're not trying to eat me yet, but Kiba abruptly corrected him. Naruto, don't jinx us, anything that can happen will happen, yelled the wolf Biju. Naruto rolled his eyes and said, Okay, Jeesh, I'm sorry. His train of thought was cut short when he noticed Shikan halting in front of what appeared to be a podium made of rocks. As soon as she did, the Jinchuriki stopped, and the group waited for another wolf to appear. This one had black fur, was slightly larger than Shakan, and had a vertical scar across his closed right eye. The other wolf's eye was yellow, brown, and it was staring at the boy with the blonde hair with interest. After Shakan told me about you, the wolf said, "Well, young human," in a rough yet powerful voice. "I'm amazed you managed to survive the forest where we made our home. But when others have second thoughts, I'd like to know why you entered the forest of death." Naruto sighed, knowing in some way that sharing his story would make things a bit dicey. The Death Forest undiscovered compound. Naruto leaves home 5 years later. Outside the seemingly deserted compound, a lone 12-year-old boy with blue eyes, blonde hair, and whiskers was practicing Akata for a taijutsu style he had discovered in the library of the aforementioned complex. At 5 feet 4 inches, he wore a forest green jacket with burnt orange stripes down the sleeves, a black shirt, black shinobi pants with white tape around the ankles, and dark brown ninja shoes. Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze, now a preteen, was ready to leave the forest and return to the village. He had made a few trips back, but only stayed for 30 minutes, staying in the shadows to avoid detection. He had stayed at the compunct, which his friends, the Hisane Kami, helped him after he told him how he ran away from his home, feeling unwanted, and wanting to get stronger, even revealing to the Alpha that he was the Jinchuriki of Kiba, much to the other people's surprise. The Alpha then came up to him, sniffed him a few times, looked into his eyes, nodded, and told him that he told the truth. He then identified himself as Sabikiba, the Alpha of the Hisane Kami, and explained that he and his pack were the last of their kind, having been hunted down mercilessly by poachers and ninja who saw them as a threat, and that they were saved and protected by a clan of samurai ninja, the Yaseirei, who brought them to the Forest of Death prior to the founding of Konoha. The Yaseirei were able to communicate telepathically with animals, and they taught the wolves how to do so. Before Hashirama Senju established the village, the wolves and humans lived in harmony. Mokazai, the clan leader of the Yaseirei at the time, instructed the pack to remain in the compound while he created a genjutsu barrier that prevented anyone from entering the grounds unless they were brought there by the locals. This is why no one had ever located the location during any of the Chunin exams that Konoha had sponsored. Sadly, the Yaseirei never came back, and the pack thought they were exterminated. After hearing this story, Naruto was in awe and asked the Alpha of the pack what would happen to him. Sabikiba replied that Naruto could use whatever he needed to train, but he could not go to the nursery because that was where the newborn cubs were born. Naruto nodded in agreement, understanding that a pregnant wolf giving birth was more dangerous and protective and would kill him without hesitation. Naruto has spent the last 5 years living, training, sleeping, and learning at the former Yaseirei compound, where he even became friends with the 3 wolf pups, Kakashoku, also known as Kaka, Basho, and Katatsume. Naruto grew to know the 3 like he would a dog in the Inuzuka clan, and the 4 gained notoriety for their mischievous behavior. In relation to the 3, oh no. The blonde was slammed onto his back by 3 brown blurs, and as the 3 dogs licked his face, he laughed and begged them to stop. "All right, folks, calm down." "No, not there." The 3 eventually ceased torturing the Jinchuriki after Naruto yelled, hearing their laughter in their brains. "Naruto, Sabikiba. Gigi is eager to see you. It's time for you to go back to the village," Kaka said. With a solemn sigh, Naruto said, "Come back, huh?" He uttered those words. He had been having bad dreams about when he would go back home. Upon seeing him, the blonde shinobi.in training pondered whether his family would ignore him, yell in rage, or do something else entirely. Not knowing what else to do, he kept his mouth shut when a group of the villagers attacked him and threatened to kill him if he ever told his family about the abuse he was receiving from them. He was also afraid that his parents would look down on them if he told them. One thing is certain, though, he was ready to inflict pain on any villager who dared to challenge him. He was strong enough to defeat any Chunin, but he was not ready to face down shinobi of a higher rank than Jonin. He discovered that the clan were knowledge seekers, going out and retrieving scrolls, books, tomes, and other artifacts back to their compound, and he learned from the Teiserei's collection of jutsu scrolls, as well as taijutsu and kenjutsu styles. He kept the wakizashi in a storage seal on his left forearm, and one of these artifacts was a set of swords called the Kazuya Cha, which included a pair of swords, a regular katana, and a wakizashi. The wakizashi was a perfect fit for him because he needed to grow out a little more to use the katana. He also discovered religious, astronomical, and other items that would drive any village in the elemental nations to its knees and start a war. He now understood why this compound needed to be kept secret, not only to protect the wolf pack, but also to shield the knowledge treasure from those who would abuse it. He stood up and started to follow his 3 friends to where Sabikiba was, sighing and shaking his head at these memories. After 5 minutes, the old pack leader was standing in the same cave when Naruto first arrived, so it didn't take long to locate him. Naruto said to the elderly wolf, who turned to gaze at the blonde with his good eye, "You wanted to see me, Sake? Oh yeah, Chan." Almost growling, he said, "You know I don't like that nickname." The old wolf sighed in resignation, and the 3 pups snickered as Naruto sheepishly scratched the back of his head and said, "Sorry, but you know I like to call you instead of Sakikiba Sama, so it won't make you think you're arrogant." He asked, "Aside from that, I asked for you to meet, because I believe it is time for you to return to the village. Why even bother?" he asked himself. I don't think I can, Sabi.og. Naruto winced slightly at that. What if things hadn't changed with the villagers? He said uneasily, looking down with his hair shading his eyes as Kiba and his 3 friends watched him with concern. What if my parents continue to disregard my sister? What if, he started, but something knocked him down, and when he looked up, he saw that it was Ka, who was intimidating him with her famous wolf glare, which would frighten any elite jonin, including Kakashi Hitaki. "You hear me out, Namikaze Naruto Uzumaki. Me and the others have known you for 5 years, and now you're gonna chicken out." She growled, and the blonde gulped as the 2 young male wolves gazed at the she-wolf in disbelief, while Sabikiba remained expressionless. "I'm sorry, but that won't do. Since you arrived here, you have been training hard to defend yourself against the village idiots. You want your parents to love and notice you, too, don't you? So get over being a wimp. Get a pair, and show them what you've worked so hard for." Naruto was taken aback by his friend's remarks and knew deep down that she was correct. He should not be afraid of the future. Instead, he should concentrate on the present and the result in the future. As he sat up and gave Ka a pat on the head, a tiny smile appeared on his face. Looking at the older wolf, he said, "Thanks, I needed that. I think I'm ready to head home now." Sabikiba smiled slightly, but it was noticeable if wolves could smile at all. "So, young Naruto, go," the alpha said. "Prove to your village that you are no longer a helpless target, and what happens when a wolf is cornered." Naruto nodded and grinned back before turning to face his friends. "Then, how about we get started? In the meantime." Returning to Konoha, home of Uzumaki, Namikaze. The Yondaime Hokage and his family's home was quiet. Minato was at the tower carrying out his duties as Hokage, and Shinri was at the Ninja Academy getting ready to graduate in a few months. As a result, the only person in the house was Kushina, who stood by the window and gazed out toward the forest of death with a solemn expression on her face. Her son had been gone for 5 years, hurt, neglected, depressed, and abused by the damned villagers who had the audacity to harm him. When the villagers learned that Naruto had run into the forest, there were celebrations in many of the bars and shops that wrongfully hated him. Naturally, because of the inebriated state of these idiots, Minato and Kushina also learned that Naruto had not told them about his abuse. Apparently, the mobs that had trapped and beaten him had threatened to kill their son if he told his family or those who had shown him kindness. The village council members also assisted in keeping the information about their son's mistreatment a secret. The villagers who had injured Naruto were sent to Ibiki, who made them sing like canaries and imprisoned them for 50 years. The civilian councilors threw a fit, but Minato shot them down and declared the civilians banned from shinobi affairs and suspended from council meetings. This led to the immediate killing of the shinobi who were personally involved, with Kushina using her chakra chains and half of the Kyuubi chakra and the former unleashing his wrath via Hiraishin Veer. 2. Kushina continued to have nightmares about Naruto being killed in gory ways, then reviving with dead eyes and demanding to know why she had left him, but that didn't make the wounds in her heart or soul go away. She once tried suicide after one of those awful nights, but was saved by her best friend Makoto Uchiha. She was put on suicide watch for 6 months until she eventually turned her life around with the support of her husband and daughter. Though Yugo claimed not to hate her or the rest of the family, Kushina knew Naruto would never trust them again, especially her, and a few tears escaped her eyes as she remembered the child she had carelessly abandoned in the shadows. She had spent a lot of time in her beloved son's room, either crying or making sure it was tidy when he returned home. "I'm such a bad mother," she thought. Naruto. Sochi. She got up when she heard someone knock on her door. As she wiped the tears from her eyes, she said, "I'll be right there," in a quiet voice that was loud enough for the person on the other side of the door to hear. She grinned as she opened the door and saw her best friend from her genin days, Makoto Uchiha, standing on the other side. How are you today, Makoto? The now Uchiha matriarch grinned back at the woman she had known for years as he said that. Since you're probably wondering why Makoto is still alive and the head of the clan, allow me to explain. She was visiting Kushina on the night that Itachi massacred the Uchiha clan, on orders from a very, and I mean very, reluctant Minato. She was taken to the hospital after the Uzumaki attempted suicide. In essence, her tardiness saved her life, and she was now leading the remaining members of the clan and assisting in the raising of her youngest son, Sasuke. Makoto smiled back at Kushina, but she could see that her friend's smile did not reach her eyes, and she understood why. As she watched Kushina unconsciously rub her wrists, she said, "Hello Kushina, I just came over to see how you were doing, and how you were holding up." "I really have been alright, Makoto." Makoto sighed as Kushina made a conceited attempt at humor. "I don't intend to kill myself anytime soon." Kushina, knowing that nothing escaped her best friend, Uzumaki said, laughing uneasily as she scratched the back of her head. Makoto, who was aware that Naruto's flight had been difficult for her, could only shake her head. She was growing even more desperate to see him again. "Kushina, he will return," she said. "He may not return today or tomorrow, but I assure you that he will." Kushina sighed as she escorted her friend to the house's living room. "How would I know that he doesn't hate me for my part in his misery?" the depressed mother said. "I wish I was more confident about that." Monument to Hokage. "All right, here we are." As he stood atop his father's head, surveying the village he had left 5 years prior, Naruto declared, this time, for good. Indeed, not much has changed in the village. Indeed, Kiba, who was also viewing the village through Naruto's eyes, said. Blonde nodded as his 3 wolf companions materialized at his side. "You think we'll run into the Hyuga girl we saved a year ago, say?" Basho said. "We may." That girl, if my memory serves me correctly, struggled with confidence until Naruto corrected her. "Naturally, following our defeat of those Kumo jerks," Katatsume replied. Kaka, who was smiling in her head as she saw Naruto's face with a hint of red, added, not to mention the look in her eyes when she looked at Naruto. Looking down at the Hokage tower, the blonde Jinchuriki moaned, "Very funny guys, very funny." He let out a hollowed sigh, knowing that he would have to face his family and answer a lot of questions about how he managed to survive the forest. He turned back to his 3 Hisan Okami friends and nodded while issuing a single command. "Let's go meet the old man." Office of the Hokage. There was still a lot of paperwork to go around, even though it had decreased since the civilians were prohibited from attending most, if not all, council meetings. Minato sighed as he read another document that needed to be signed. "One thing is certain, though, I won't sign any nonsense that results in Naruto being exiled or labeled a missing. Nin. How Sarutobi Sama survived this bullshit, I will never know," he told himself. After Minato's son, Naruto, ran away from home and into Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death, he sent Anbu search parties in to find him, but they all returned exhausted, battered, and without anything. Minato and his family had endured a trying 5 years. Next came his wife's suicide attempt, which was mercifully saved by Makoto, who survived the Uchiha massacre because her husband, Fugaku, had attempted a coup. Next came another attempt by Kumo to steal the Byakugan by kidnapping Hinata, but this time the Chunin were found alive, albeit with bruises and, to the surprise of the rescue team, bite marks from canine teeth. They were sent back to Kumo with a warning not to attempt to steal the Byakugan again. To Hiyoshi's pride and the elders' concern, Hinata had been training constantly since that day, but she still wouldn't reveal who had saved her. Jiraiya then reported that Orochimaru had taken over Rice Country, established his own ninja village, and that he had seen members of an organization known as Akatsuki that had unknown goals. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and sighed. Every year was becoming more hectic. The one thing that made him most uncomfortable, though, was his son. He and Kushina were unforgiving of those who had harmed their child after learning that the village had beaten Naruto behind their backs and threatened to kill him. He cursed himself after learning from a few drunks that they had hurt his son but not following through because he was too ignorant. There was nothing he could do now, and his son would surely despise him. He was thinking when he heard a disturbance outside. "I told you, young man. The Hokage is currently very busy. I also mentioned that pets are not permitted." "Whatever you say, you flat-chested weasel, I don't care. They're also my familiars, not pets. I don't see you griping about the Inuzuka entering here with their ninkin. They are an exception, which explains why. And you little punk, who are you accusing of flat-chesting? Put an end to them. Put an end to them. You mutt, let go of my arm." When Minato heard his secretary screaming and the sounds of snarling and fighting outside his office door, he blinked. Let go of the secret, Gaki. Ah, damn you. Minato and the Anbu protecting him jumped into taijutsu stances as the door slammed open and a Chunin's body flew through. They looked as the people who had caused the disturbance entered, and when Minato saw one of them, his eyes widened because he saw a miniature version of himself as a genin, albeit one with a different colored jacket. Hey, are you shocked to see me, old man? As he stammered out the name of his guest, Minato couldn't help but gape like a fish. Naruto. His eyes were the eyes of a dedicated shinobi, but they also mirrored his wife's, and despite the obvious fake smile, Minato saw the pain, sadness, and fear. Why would he be afraid? Minato couldn't believe his eyes as he saw his son standing directly in front of him, accompanied by 3 wolves. He had grown well, and he could see the amount of training he had undergone. Minato started to say, Naruto, but was interrupted. In an attempt to avoid speaking to his father for the time being, Naruto said, I'm here to sign up for the academy, if I'm not too late, that is. Although he had forgiven them, he was still afraid of allowing them to approach him, only to be disappointed and devastated. After a few moments of silence during which his son's casual interruption startled him, Minato was able to find his voice. Yeah. However, Naruto, you must tell me what transpired in the forest, and what's causing the wolves to follow you? He gestured to Naruto's familiars, who were glancing warily at the Hokage and the Anbu. Minato winced and the Anbu tensed as Naruto's smile turned to a frown and he said, I'll tell you once I feel like I can trust you. At minimum, will you return home? In the hopes that his now estranged son would return home, Minato asked. Naruto put a hand on Katatsu's head and said, I might. That is, if you let my friends into the house. I promise that they will behave. Minato stared at the 3 rather large wolves, who seemed to be daring him to refuse. All right, Minato said with a sigh and a nod, however, you ought to speak with your mother. He observed Naruto not flinching at all and remarked, your departure was hard on her. Unbeknownst to Minato, though, Naruto did flinch, albeit mentally. As Kibo responded, he thought, she took it that bad? Kami, I'm such an idiot. Still, I can't trust them yet. They need to earn my trust. As Naruto glared at his partner in his mind, the new Biju remarked, and that's why I told you to leave them a note. He exclaimed, zip it, moron, and Kibo could only sigh in response. He pondered, being careful not to let Naruto hear, one day, Naruto, you're going to do something that you will forever regret. I will attempt to speak with her. However, be aware that she shares your situation. Minato nodded, relieved that Naruto had been able to let his sister in. Shiri is not off the hook, but because she didn't know what was going on, I'll give her a chance, Naruto said. He opened a desk drawer, took out a piece of paper, and started writing on it, saying, I understand that, son. This note will let you into Shinri's class. Iruka Amino, her instructor, deserves it. He's a decent guy. I'm sure you'd like to graduate alongside other students your own age. Minato wrote down what he needed to write, sealed it, and handed it to Naruto, who nodded as he walked over to the desk and accepted the letter. Minato said, I'll see you at home later, then. Naruto nodded and turned to leave the office through the doorway that had been destroyed. Minato looked at the door on his office floor and the still, cold Chunin, letting out a sigh he didn't realize he was holding. The Anbu nodded as they gathered up the Chunin and anyone else outside who had been knocked out or bitten by the wolves and took them to the hospital. Please get him, and whoever else was outside to the hospital, and have some janitors fix the door. Looking back at his paperwork, he thought, I'm going to have to work hard to get Naruto to trust me again, but if things go well, I can atone for the mistakes I made. Academy of Konoha Ninja. It was nice to hear the history of your home once or twice, but Iruka Sensei was a person who made it boring. Boring. Shinri Uzumaki. Namikaze yawned as she listened to her class's Chunin instructor ramble on and on about the history of Konoha, which she heard 5 times. She felt as though she would rip out her red hair in frustration if she had to listen to Iruka's lengthy, drawn-out lectures any longer. Sweet Kami. Sama, please help us all. Please provide us with a distraction so that we don't have to listen to this torture. Iruka stopped and went to the classroom door when he heard a knock. Thank you. She exclaimed in her mind with delight as she shed anime tears of joy, but her face changed to one of surprise when she saw the person on the other side enter, and then to shock. Aniki? She was shocked to see her brother Naruto standing by the classroom door. Despite the passage of 5 years, she could still remember him. Her confusion increased when 3 dogs, or what she believed to be dogs, joined him. Pardon me? Iruka Amino, Sensei in this room 23A? The Chunin instructor blinked in perplexity when Naruto asked. How can I help you? Iruka replied, yes, that's right. Iruka took the note that his father had given him, opened it, and read the contents before his eyes widened and then turned into a smile as Naruto approached the academy teacher and handed it to him. As the blonde nodded, he said, well, Naruto-san, I must say welcome back from your training. Now, if you would take a seat next to. Let's see. Oh, you can take a seat beside Hinata. After hearing that, the girl blushed, and Naruto nodded before approaching the Hyuga heiress. Meanwhile, Kyuubi no Yoko, also known as Kurama, who was only known to his fellow Biju, watched this from the seal. His eyes narrowed behind the cage as he sensed something from the blonde and smelled a strange smell. As the blonde walked by him, he thought, he smells of wolves, and I also smell something similar, akin different to my chakra. What is this? A moment later, a picture of a wolf-like creature with the same number of tails and yellow eyes stared back at him. The fox was shocked and gasped in surprise as the image disappeared as soon as it appeared. What was that? Totally caught off guard, he said. Shinri felt the seal on her stomach suddenly become cold and put a hand on it, blinking outside the seal. What is happening? She asked herself. It appears the fox sensed the wolf. She looked up to see her brother staring at her blankly, and she was perplexed by what he had just said, wondering what he meant. However, Naruto and the three wolves continued their journey towards Hinata before he sat down next to the Hyuga, who blushed at the sight of her crush. It's been what? Naruto said, hello again, Hinata. We've been together for 4 years. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle as the shy but now self-assured Hyuga nodded her head without saying anything. Don't worry, I won't bite. As he put his hand on her shoulder and made her blush like a tomato, he said with a smile. A boy with brown shaggy hair, a hood with a puppy inside, brown slits in his tattoos that resembled fangs, and feral features snarled as he watched the blonde's actions toward the Hyuga heiress. Kiba Inuzuka, the heir to the Inuzuka clan, felt a threat to his position as the alpha male after just one sniff of the blonde, and the three wolves that were with him made him uneasy. He wasn't alone. Sasuke Uchiha, who was his clan's last heir until he got married and had a child, was also disturbed by the vibe the blonde was projecting. Although Shikamaru Nara, another clan heir, appeared bored, he was actually studying the new student, and he wasn't alone. Shino Aburame was also observing the prodigal son of the Hokage while he spoke with his friend. All right. A new student has been added to this class by the Hokage, Iruka stated. He and a member of the bodyguard detail have been on a training trip. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself? With a nod, Naruto got to his feet. To nearly everyone's surprise, he revealed, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze. I enjoy training, my friends, and ramen. Hypocrites, abusers, kidnappers, and poachers are the things I dislike. I want to start a family and become a great ninja in the future. My goal is to prove to my family that I am valuable and to the villagers that I am not who they believe me to be. Hearing that was like a knife to the heart, and Shinri winced. At that, Iruka nodded and grinned slightly. Thank you, Naruto. He replied. You can sit down now. As Iruka went on with his talk, Naruto nodded and took a seat again. A couple of hours later, as the students left the academy, the remainder of the school day passed quickly. Naruto and his familiars were on their way to the gate after talking to Hinata when he heard a rough voice. Hey! When Naruto turned, the Inuzuka heir was standing there, glaring at him as if he were dead. Yes, how may I assist you? If it could, Kiba's glare intensified as Naruto spoke. Avoid being near Hinata. The blonde raised an eyebrow in response to his statement. Why? The Inuzuka heir's face flushed red with rage when he said, apparently, she enjoys having me around. Simply stop talking and avoid her wolf boy. He yelled and tried to charge at him, but he stopped when the three wolves started to growl and snarl at the untamed dog boy, which unnerved him. I wouldn't shout at me if I were you, he warned. My friends are very protective of me, and if anyone tries to harm me, they attack. Naruto sighed and shook his head, aware of the rivalry between wolves and dogs, for wolves had no masters and were only loyal to the pack, treating each other like family. The Inuzuka simply glared at Naruto before letting out a humph and running away. According to Naruto, wolves and dogs were similar to samurai in that they worked for a lord until the end of their lives, whereas wolves were more like ronin and struggled to support their families. That mutt has no right to say that to you. As she watched the Inuzuka leave, Kaka mentally yelled, if I ever hear him say that to you again, I'll hunt him down and... Through their link, Naruto said, "Koka, just drop it. We're not here to cause fights." With a sigh, the female wolf glanced at her human companion and said, "You're too kind for your own good. I assume you are aware of that." When she said that, Naruto grinned. "Do you guys think it would be better if I were a jerk dictator who only cared about destroying my family and the entire elemental nations?" He posed the question, and Kibo and the three yearlings all considered it. They were all unnerved by the thought of an insane Naruto wreaking havoc and killing people everywhere. They said in a deadpan tone, "Not really," which made Naruto laugh a little. Aniki. Naruto blinked as he saw his sister coming toward him, looking nervous, as though she might be hit if she said the wrong word. However, Naruto wasn't the kind of guy who would hit a girl, much less his own twin sister. Shinri. Imouto. Yes? His twin fumbled with her hands before she could say anything in response to his question. Anyo. Would you like to? You want to walk home? He finished for her, and she nodded as she looked to the ground. Naruto sighed as he shook his head. Why not? That made her head twitch. But his hand was raised. "I suggest you don't to cling onto me like a parasite, or else my friends will mistake you as a threat." The parasite remark deflated Shinri, but she nodded and walked to stand next to her brother, the three wolves, who glanced at her calmly but warily, although she was tempted to pet one of them because of the expression in their eyes. After that, the two siblings departed the academy grounds together and started toward their house. After 20 minutes had passed since they had left the academy, and Naruto had observed how the villagers now behaved toward him, bowing apologetic bows or turning their heads away in embarrassment. Shinri had also noticed this, as the truth had come to light that her father had lied about the Kyuubi being sealed in her rather than her brother. Many of the villagers were depressed, and a few even killed themselves by seppuku. She kept an eye out for those specific individuals, but sadly, not many were out and about, but she didn't let her guard down. Of course, there were still a lot of the villagers who wanted to see Naruto dead and still saw him as the fox. It took them a little longer to reach their home's front gate, and once they were inside, they paused at the front door. Knowing that this would be the real moment of his mother's reaction to him, Naruto inhaled deeply. As he approached the door and turned the knob, he thought, well, it's bound to happen sooner or later. In the house itself, Kushina continued to talk to Makoto about how she could have done better with Naruto, despite the Uchiha's attempts to reassure her that, despite her actions being wrong, the Uzumaki regretted them. Kushina felt that she should have done more and that she was solely responsible for her actions. When they heard the door open, Kushina realized it was late because Shinri must have returned from the academy and Makoto had arrived. Makoto noticed it too, blinking in confusion, and she was about to greet her daughter when she saw Shinri enter the room with a look that told her she was being apprehensive about something. The two women became even more perplexed when the young redhead nervously said, "Hey Ka-san, Makoto-oba." Shinri. "What the, Matt?" she said, stopping as her eyes widened and she saw someone emerge and stand next to Shinri. It was a person she hadn't seen in a long time, but who was now an adult and dressed like a true shinobi. She had her husband's cerulean blue eyes, the same blonde hair with red tips, and 6 whiskered birthmarks, 3 on each side of his face. Makoto, who was in the same boat as Kushina, noticed her best friend's son standing right in front of him, next to his sister, and then she noticed the 3 wolves standing by his side. Although she was a little uneasy about the 3 animals, her primary concern at the moment was for Kushina, who was crying. Naruto, is it really you?" she said, her voice barely audible above a whisper, as she started to slowly approach her son. Naruto said nothing, but he could see that his father was correct when he looked at his mother. She was a little thinner than usual and the shadows under her eyes indicated that she hadn't slept well in a while. He heard her sob, Sochi, and as she got close enough, her eyes started to flow freely. He put his hand on her mouth and she lifted a trembling hand to her son's face, caressing him. My baby, he said. She touched his face, and Naruto did nothing to stop her. His trust in her was shattered, but at least he could console her. As he previously stated, he will not be a jerk, but he will not make it too simple for his family to gain his forgiveness. He sighed as he gazed at his hopeful mother's face, hoping it wasn't a dream. He said in a neutral tone, "Hi, Ka-san, it's me." That was it, as Kushina embraced her son tightly. While Koka and the others appeared ready to attack, Naruto telepathically instructed them to hold off since he knew his mother needed closure. Kushina simply shook her head as she clung to him, but he said, "Ka-san, I know you don't want to hear this from me. But I can't trust you and the rest of the family yet." "It doesn't matter. She replied, "You're back home, and that's all that matters." Naruto blinked at that, but as he allowed Kushina to hold him, a tiny smile appeared on his lips, and he felt genuinely delighted because he knew that this hug was one that was full of love. Unbeknownst to them, Kiba was watching the entire event and couldn't help but smile because he could feel Kushina's love for his son through Naruto. He knew it would take time, but based on his father's memories, he could tell that Kushina was a strong woman who would stop at nothing to regain her son's trust. He thought, "You should be happy, Naruto. She loved you like any mother would, despite the fact that she neglected you. Don't mess it up." After that, he kept watching as mother and son were reunited. June 1st, the day of graduation academy of Konoha Ninja. A few months had passed since Naruto came home and started attending the Ninja Academy, and he had been rapidly catching up to his classmates ever since. His sister and Sasuke, his self-proclaimed rival, who would challenge him to a fight whenever he had the chance, were now at least as close to him as he was. Naturally, either the young Uzumaki Namikaze simply ignored him or his three wolf companions leapt the Uchiha, causing the boy with the raven hair to squeal like a young girl. The second one made him and Shinri laugh while insulting the Emo's fan club, which was run by a howler monkey civilian named Sakura Haruno. Regarding his relationship with his family, he had been gradually becoming more open with them. One advantage came from his father, who assured him that he was free to strike back if he was ever attacked by any of the shinobi and villagers who still detested Naruto. Another benefit was that his mother, who was more focused on regaining his trust, had taken care of his room, purchased some new gear for him from a ninja surplus store outside the village, and disciplined a few shinobi who attempted to pull a fast one. He claimed it wasn't necessary, but Kushina assured him that regardless of his age, she would always protect him as she should. Despite her nervousness, his sister was able to act as an informant by telling him who in the Ninja Academy he should and shouldn't trust, primarily the students and a few teachers. Naturally, Sasuke was one of the academy students he was instructed to watch out for. Others included Sakura, Kiba and Izuka, and the fan club she was in charge of. He appreciated these pointers. In the few months since his return, he also started spending more time with Hinata, who was gradually overcoming her shyness. The villagers and shinobi, specifically the Inuzuka, gave Naruto's lupine companions the nickname, Wolf Trio, and the girl even got along well with them. Since they had never seen a dire wolf before, the dog user's mother and older sister were more interested in his three friends than Kiba was. Koka was the most apprehensive of the three younglings, but he eventually warmed up to them and their partners, Kuromaru and the Haimaru triplets. He was also able to establish friendships with Shikamaru Nara, Shoji Akamichi, and Shino Aburame. All three were clan leaders and pleasant to be around, though one was intelligent but a little slothful, and the big-boned friend consumed more food than a wild boar. They eventually graduated from the academy today, and they were then assigned to teams. He and the trio were seated next to Hinata, and the former was patting one of them on the head. Many of them were noisy as they waited for their sensei to arrive with their classmates. Naturally, that came to an end when Iruka entered the room and used his big head jutsu to command the students to stop talking. After only a few months of acquaintance, Naruto had already grown to like the Chunin Academy instructor and could only smile. Despite his tough exterior, he had a deep concern for his students. "Okay, now that I have your attention, it's time to go through the final exam before you graduate. You are to do 3 of the academy basics, and if possible, perform a bonus jutsu you may have learned." Iruka responded and took out a clipboard. "We will by alphabetical order. When you hear your name, you will head to the next room and be examined to see if you pass. Alright, first up." The process of determining who would be a ninja and who wouldn't started as each student went to the next room one at a time. When they returned, only a small number of them had their Hite.8, and their faces were filled with disappointment. Soon after, Naruto's name was called, and the young Jinchuriki got up and went to the room next to their homeroom class, indicating to his 3 familiars to stay with Hinata, after he had seen Shinri and Hinata return with their own headbands and congratulated them. As he walked into the room, he saw Iruka and another white-haired Chunin named Mizuki. Naruto had no faith in the latter because he had seen the suspicious academy teacher cast sneering glances at Hinata and his sister. Iruka's voice interrupted his thoughts. He said, "Okay Naruto, just do the academy 3, and a bonus jutsu." Naruto nodded, then continued. He made Iruka blink before nodding. "Before I start Iruka. Sensei, I have a problem forming a regular bunshin, so, is it alright for me to make a substitute in lieu of that?" he asked. Iruka and Mizuki were greatly surprised when Naruto used the Kawarimi no Jutsu and the Henge no Jutsu. He then made the Kage Bunshin by making a cross-shaped hand sign with his fingers, which caused the latter to curse in his head. Iruka exclaimed, great job, Naruto." Naruto nodded before starting to execute another set of hand seals. Tora, Usagi, Habi, Ushi, and Inu. Naruto called out the name of his jutsu after making the hand signs and using the least amount of chakra possible. Futen. Daitopa no jutsu, he exclaimed, sending a gust of wind into the room from his mouth. Despite its lack of strength, it was sufficient to make the two Chunin cover their faces as they caught flying pieces of paper. Iruka took a deep breath to gather his thoughts after the gust passed and the two mid-level ninja had collected all the papers. Naruto nodded as he moved forward, grabbed a black-clothed Hite.8, and wrapped it around his head. "Well done, Naruto. You passed. Come and get your Hite.8 and return to the homeroom class." After bowing to the two Chunin, he returned to his classmates in the room. After 30 minutes, the academy building's exterior. Leaning against the tree with the swing dangling from one of its branches, Naruto sighed as he stood outside and watched the newly graduated ninja being congratulated by their families and relatives. He and the trio then left. An emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time welled up inside him as he and his Ninken partners watched. "I'm jealous." Although he was prepared to give his parents another chance, he remained cautious that it might happen again. However, the future was not predetermined, as they say. But his thoughts were cut short when he noticed his sister walking away from the crowd with Mizuki and striking up a conversation. Curious, Naruto listened to what the two were discussing using his enhanced Senseiza, a perk of being a Jinchuriki. When he mentioned stealing the forbidden scroll of seals, his eyes narrowed, and Shinri's eyes widened slightly, which he knew was fear. Additionally, he was able to capture the alleged gathering spot in the forest outside the village. Since day one, Naruto had unsettling feelings about Mizuki. He also felt that the academy teacher exuded an aura that screamed the words, deceiver, and arrogant. Unfortunately, his sister was unaware of his shiftiness, but she shared the same kind of feeling. He questioned his partners, "You guys thinking what I'm thinking?" "Yeah, I bet anything that Creep is setting your sis up," Kibo replied. Naruto nodded, and the three wolves nodded in agreement with the young Biju in their minds. Naruto stated, "I think it's best we keep an eye on her. We'll see what Mizuki has planned." A few hours later, Tower of Hokage, with the exception of the shinobi and Anbu on night guard duty. The majority of the village had now gone to sleep, making it nighttime. The theft of the scroll of forbidden seals, however, disrupted this tranquil evening. All ninja-ranked Chunin and Jonin were assembled at the Hokage Tower and told who had taken the scroll. "What? Shinri-san stole the forbidden scroll. But why did she do it? Doesn't matter why she stole it. We have to get it back before it falls into the wrong hands." Minato yelled, "Enough!" And the assembled shinobi turned to face their Hokage. "Now I don't understand why Shinri would steal the forbidden scroll. What I do understand is that she's possibly being manipulated by someone." At that line, all of the shinobi started to whisper. When a hand grabbed him by the rumple of his shirt, he was forced to turn around and stare into the glaring eyes of a very protective mother. "You don't think it's the dem?" muttered one stupid Chunin, who was regrettably not silent enough. With a more tense tone, she growled, "Just what were you about to finish, Chunin?" Ninja gulped in terror. The terrified ninja squeaked out, Nothing, Kushina-sama." She said, "That's what I thought," and let him go roughly. All Minato could do was sigh at the stupidity of some of his ninja. His wife has already apprehended at least 4 Jonin and 8 Chunin who had the audacity to claim that their son was a demon. Nami no Kuni was then given a punch infused with Kyuubi chakra. At the end, he stated with strict tension, "Going forward, all ninja are to spread out and find Shinri, and bring her back here unharmed. Now, go." Following that directive, every ninja dispersed and set out to find their Hokage's daughter. Like a cheetah, Kushina was jumping from roof to roof, determined not to lose another of her kids. Cabin outside the village where Mizuki had instructed Shinri to land, Shinri did. Her arms were tightly encircled by the forbidden scroll. She was perspiring anxiously due to what Mizuki had told her as well as the fact that she had stolen a very significant scroll. She snapped her head at the familiar voice, "So, you made it. That's good." Mizuki was standing there, a sickly, evil smile on his face. Shinri gave the cunning Chunin a glare in return. The red-haired girl yelled, "You can have this after you tell me," while the white-haired traitor merely laughed. He started to say, "Of course, my part of the deal of why your parents began to neglect your demon." But the girl snapped at him, interrupting him. Shinri yelled, My brother is not a demon, you asshole, Mizuki moaned in frustration. He remarked, you know, I hate interrupting brats. Shinri's hold on the scroll tightened as she readied herself to run. As I was saying, the reason why your parents began to neglect your dear brother, he said the word brother with a foul odor, was because of a genjutsu that was placed on them before the two of you turned 4. It was a plan by my master to make that little punk hate you, your parents, and the entire village of Konoha. Then he let out a frustrated sigh. However, that plan backfired when he was only sad and not angry, and instead trained to get stronger while he was Forest of Death, and came back 5 years later with those wolves that follow him around everywhere. At this, Shinri's eyes enlarged. Therefore, Naruto's neglect was not her parents' fault. Rather, someone was involved, which is what drove her brother away. This information made her grit her teeth in rage. She drew a kunai and pointed it at the scroll, causing the Chunin's eyes to narrow dangerously. Who placed the genjutsu? Tell me, she said, or I'll slash this scroll to pieces. After initially remaining silent, the Chunin smiled once more and said, now you wouldn't do that. He then hurried the startled girl, grabbed her hand with the kunai, and backhanded her to the ground. His smile grew larger and more menacing as he said, now that I got what I came for, I don't need you anymore. But first, I'm gonna have some fun with you. After dropping the scroll, he approached the stunned girl and extended his hand to seize her. Just for his hand to be chomped down by a mouthful of teeth, drawing blood. He screamed in agony, ah, get off me, as the dire wolf clamped down on his arm. He screamed in pain as a second set of teeth chomped on his forearm as he tried to grab kunai. Basho and Naruto landed close to Shinri during this time, and the former woke the girl up by licking her face. She said, wah, Basho, before glancing up to see her brother, Ni-san. After giving a nod, Naruto turned back to the scene where Koka and Katatsume were still clinging to the struggling Chunin. The two young wolves released the traitor and returned to their friend's side when he blew a sharp whistle. Mizuki turned to face them, and when he saw Naruto, his eyes narrowed. Then he growled, you. The young man teasingly said, hey, Mizuki. Teme, I see you enjoy making people's lives as miserable as always. He grabbed the Fuma shuriken on his back and yelled, shut up you damn punk, instead. I'm gonna enjoy killing you, to hell what the old mummy says. At that, Naruto raised an eyebrow. Old mummy. As Mizuki started to spin the enormous shuriken in his hand and his face started to exhibit hints of mild insanity, he thought. He then jumped forward with the intention of killing the Hokage's son, but a tendril of green chakra appeared out of nowhere, dazing the traitor as he slammed him back into a tree. I'll finish you in one blow. Now die, he exclaimed. As a cloak of the flowing green chakra started to form around her brother, Shinri's eyes widened in shock. The chakra felt cozy and soothing for some reason. She was unable to see that Naruto's eyes had transformed into wolf eyes as he glared at Mizuki, who was regaining consciousness. His own eyes also widened in surprise upon seeing the chakra cloak. Why? You're a... He muttered a little in terror as he saw Lupine's eyes staring down at him as if he were a sheep. In a slightly guttural voice, he growled, yeah, I am. And now, I'm gonna beat your ass so hard, you will never be a shinobi, again. Then, without warning, Mizuki felt a foot strike his cheek before he flew through the shack's 2 walls and into the shadows of the forest. After drawing his wakizashi from the saya on his back, Kibo's first Jinchuriki turned to face his sister and Lupine companions. Her brother only spoke 2 words, and the former was still in disbelief over what she was witnessing. Stay here. Then he followed Mizuki farther into the forest. Shinri wondered what that green chakra was and why her brother's blue eyes changed from a cerulean blue to a lupine yellow. Brown as she watched him go into the woods, but before she can think about this. Shinri. Shinri turned to see her mother approaching. She exclaimed, Ka-san, with joy at seeing her. Shinri cried as Kushina finally arrived at her daughter and gave her a hug. When she said, Ka-san, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, Mizuki. Kushina hushed her and assured her that everything was fine before breaking the embrace and forcing her daughter to look at her with a firm expression on her face, but Shinri could tell by the look in her eyes that the older redhead was plotting to murder her former academy teacher. She asked firmly, where is Mizuki? And Shinri remembered before turning to face her brother, who had followed Mizuki. As Kushina's eyes widened at the information, they turned determined and regained her daughter's attention. Naruto.ni. He had some green chakra flowing around him. He then proceeded to beat Mizuki to a pulp before kicking him that way, she said, pointing in that direction. With finality, she said, Listen to me. I want you to stay here with Naruto's wolves until I get back with your brother. You understand? Shinri nodded, and Kushina got up and followed her son and the white-haired traitor. She's hoping her son will be okay. With Mizuki and Naruto, Mizuki slammed against a tree, back first, and grunted. One of the traitor's eyes was swollen shut, and his body was covered in cuts, bruises, and stab wounds. This is absurd. A wet behind the ears genin is what he's supposed to be, but like an elite jonin, he's thrashing me around. He thought angrily as Naruto stood on a tree branch, his lupine eyes full of sympathy and disdain as he gazed down on the Chunin traitor. The former is more prevalent than the latter. He mockingly remarked, TFT, and you call yourself a Chunin? What a pathetic waste. Mizuki's unswollen eye glared at the blonde teenager, and he growled. Shut the hell up, you brat, he retorted, attempting to lift himself up. There was absolutely no change in Naruto's expression. He planned to infuriate the Chuan even more by taunting them, saying, it's true, you were so arrogant that your greed for power was overwhelming, making you stupid and weak. And it operated flawlessly. The fallen Chunin summoned a kunai from his holster and roared, I said shut up, in a futile attempt to murder this child. But Mizuki was unaware that Naruto had created 4 cage bunshin. One of them materialized and attached a knee to Mizuki's stomach, causing the white-haired man to gasp, before he was kicked 3 times into the air. As the real Naruto emerged above him, he closed his eyes in agony. Now, Ikami no Odori, he said humbly, before the stupid traitor, unable to scream due to the extreme pain he was in, was subjected to a barrage of slashes and stabs. It continued for a full minute until the two returned to earth, Mizuki with a loud thud and Naruto landing on his knees. Looking at the traitor's form, Naruto saw that he was still alive, albeit very weakly. As his eyes revert to their cerulean blue and his chakra starts to fade, he said, okay, I may have gone a little overboard. Then he flicked Mizuki's blood off the wakizashi and put it back in its saya. A little rusty when executing the attack, but the results are good, he said. Yes, it's not bad for a beginner. Oh no, after his partner's words, Naruto blinked, then his own eyes widened, he snapped his head around, and his heart fell to his stomach. His mother was standing there, looking shocked, dressed in her Jonin uniform. Oh no. Naruto stayed motionless while he and his mother, who was still wearing a shocked expression, exchanged glances. Neither of them knew how to respond, but Kushina acted instantly when she noticed her son threatening to run away. Wait, Naruto, he said, trying to sound as calm as possible, as she immediately began to walk toward him, please, don't run. As Kushina kept coming closer, Naruto stood motionless, and after what seemed like hours, she finally got close enough to kneel down on his level and put her hands on her son's shoulders. Don't worry, Sochi. I am not upset, she said, I still plan to fulfill my promise to never harm you again. I'm not sure what's happening, but if what I witnessed is any indication. After pausing, she put one hand on her anxious child's face. I dealt with other Jinchuriki besides myself and your sister Naruto, and I know the difference between a pseudo and a full one, she continued. When I felt your chakra, it was on par with the Kyuubi. Feeling like a bug under a microscope, Naruto swallowed. I am aware that you do not yet have complete faith in Shinri, your father, or me. The blonde's eyes widened as she said, but I won't throw away the hard work I did to win it back, by pressing you. He could still recall all the wonderful things Kushina and Minato had done to win back their son's favor, including throwing a celebration to celebrate his academy graduation. His sister even suggested that they hold their own party after Naruto's, prior to the whole incident with Mizuki. Naruto, you are loved by everyone, she said, causing Naruto to mentally gasp in surprise, and no matter how hard we try to win it back, we will always love you. As the Anbu arrived, Kushina smiled slightly and looked at her only son, telling them that everything was fine and that she would return the tower before ordering Mizuki to be restrained and taken to Ibiki. Naruto still remained silent, only nodding as his posture relaxed a little. The mother then returned to the Hokage Tower with her 2 children, the Scroll and the Wolves. Tower of Hokage an hour following the capture of Mizuki. As he sat in his father's office with his mother, sister, the Sandame, and, not surprisingly, his surrogate sister, Yugo, wearing her Anbu mask and cloak and placing a reassuring hand on the blonde's shoulder, Naruto felt anxious, feeling that he would have to explain his now real status as a full Jinchuriki, but not this soon, and he was obviously unsure of how his family would react to the fact that he is the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi's child. Minato sighed as he sat behind the desk and looked at his son, who, despite his calm exterior, was attempting to fend off the nervousness he was experiencing at being in the spotlight. He was grateful that those old crones, Homura, Kaharu, and most importantly, Danzo, were not present because they would have likely put pressure on Naruto to divulge all of his knowledge and what that green chakra was, according to Kushina and Shinri. The Yondaime decided to start the conversation. Naruto. He replied, I know you've been back for only a few months, and that's probably not enough to earn your full trust back. Then he sat up straight in his chair. But there's one thing that's certain. He took a deep breath and stopped himself, saying, I'm not angry with you, Naruto, nor with anyone else. You used something that is typically only associated with true Jinchuriki, and while you had a small access of the Kyuubi's chakra after the attack. Whatever you know, I'm sure you want to keep it a secret. But please, don't be scared to tell us when you feel like it. Then he turned to Shinri, who showed her nervousness without even trying to hide it. Minato stated in a severe and firm manner, as for you, young lady. You had been training as a shinobi since you were 4 years old, despite the fact that we now know Mizuki was the one manipulating you. Why didn't you come to us or at least wait for help to arrive before releasing Mizuki? More importantly, why didn't you tell your mother or me? That made Shinri wince a little, but she was still able to respond. Everyone raised an eyebrow when she said, he had information that I wanted, and said he'll give me the answers if I gave him the scroll. Data. Shinri. Shan, about what? Hiruzen uttered those words as the young redhead bowed her head. Th. The true cause of Y2.San and Ka.San neglected Oni.San. Naruto and the two parents were caught off guard by that bit of information. Masumi, what did he tell you? Minato inquired. After some hesitation, Shinri finally managed to express it. He said that a genjutsu was placed on you and Ka.San by the time just before we turned 4, and the plan was for Naruto.Ni to begin to despise you, and force him away from the village, she said, making the eyes of the two parents and Naruto's to widen in shock. Of course the plan backfired, and Naruto only went into the forest of death out of sadness and a need to get stronger. As she concluded, Naruto started searching his mind for anyone who might have benefited from placing a genjutsu on his parents. He wasn't alone, though, as his father and Hiruzen were also looking for the person who placed the genjutsu, and they had narrowed down their suspect list to at least 5 people. Danzo, Orochimaru, Homura and Kaharu, or the man in the mask who led the Kyuubi to attack the village 12 years ago. Despite being famous ninja in their prime, Minato immediately ruled out the first 2 as suspects because they were too old and had become slack in their training due to their transition to politics, and they weren't stupid enough to anger the 4th Hokage despite their complaints about how he ran the village. Orochimaru had 2 clear options. 1. He wanted to exact revenge on Konoha and Minato for denying him the Hokage position, and 2. He would have used Naruto as a tool and perhaps even offered him training to exact revenge on his family. Danzo, on the other hand, was determined to have Naruto molded as a weapon for the village. Had Naruto left the village, his route would have been ready to capture him and take him to his base, where he would be brainwashed into serving him and him alone. The masked man might have attempted to persuade Naruto to leave, just like Danzo, because he wanted the Kyuubi to destroy the village. Naruto picked that time to talk. To get the others' attention, he said, remember something that Mizuki said. It has to do with the old mummy, and what he said. The young Hokage was about to order an investigation on the old bastard right now, and squeeze any information he knows, until he gets a confession. Minato and Hiruzen's immediately narrowed their eyes at that, knowing that Danzo was called the Not.So. Affectionate nickname by both the ninja and the villagers. He then took a deep mental breath to calm himself, knowing that getting angry was not going to help matters. He said, okay, getting out of the chair, I think it's best we turn in for the night because it was a hectic day for all of us. Your teams will be sorted out in a week, he said, turning to face his kids, and on that day, go to the academy at precisely 10 in the morning. He addressed them as son and daughter, and they got up and left the office with Yugo, heading home with Kushina. Minato turned to face Hiruzen gravely after they had left. I swear Hiruzen, he snarled, whether you're an old friend or not, I'll kill the mummy son of a bitch myself as soon as I have evidence that it was him. Hiruzen didn't initially, then let out a weary sigh. If Danzo is really behind your neglect of your son, Minato, we need to find some serious incriminating evidence that it was him. Hiruzen said, in order to do that you must read his next move, and when you have him cornered, you must strike. Minato gave that a nod. I know, Sandame. Sama, he said, grinning wearily at the elderly man, I knew I was right to choose you as my advisor. You're not a bitch or make some pathetic excuse about the good of the village, or something like that, unlike your former teammates. My boy, I may love the village like my own family, but there are times when the patriarch of the family has to put their foot down and tell the quarreling family members to shut up, Hiruzen said without humor before he and his successor started laughing at the reality of it all. Hiruzen laughed heartily at that. After the two men ceased their laughter, Hiruzen sighed, lit his pipe, and resumed his conversation. Minato, why don't you go home? You must be with your family, he said, adding that the paperwork would not be resolved. Take a week off. With a nod of agreement, Minato said, thank you, Sandame. Sama, and then vanished in a flash of yellow light. 1 week later, Shinobi Academy of Konoha. After a week, the day of team placements had come, and all of the students were excitedly chatting among themselves about who would be on which team. Most of them were Sasuke fan club fangirls, and they all wanted to be on the Uchiha's team, much to the annoyance and wrath of said duck. But Sakura Haruno was the most fervent of the group who wanted to be on Sasuke's team. She had reprimanded Shinri during her first 2 years here, but she left the Uzumaki alone after being THRA. Naruto, who was sitting next to Hinata, ignored the fangirls as he thought about what his sister had said the previous evening. He had never thought about the possibility that someone had put a genjutsu on his parents to force them to ignore him. They were both very strong and skilled shinobi, so it had to be someone who was on par with or even stronger than them. Not to mention the part about a old mummy that the cunning academy teacher said, which further perplexed him. But as Iruka entered the classroom with a clipboard in hand, his thoughts were cut off. Iruka cleared his throat to start the team assignments after calming the class down. Of course, this required using his big head no jutsu. All right, class, this is the day. As all of the aspiring young shinobi grinned, he said, it's time for you to be divided into teams. Now, for Team 1. The fangirls moaned or complained that they couldn't be on there. Cue gag noises. Prince Charming's team, as the names of the students from teams 1 through 5 were called. Now for Team 6, Shinri Uzumaki. This made the girl perk up. Naruto Uzumaki. While his sister grinned, pleased to have her brother on her side, Naruto and the wolves listened. And Hinata Hyuga. A slam could be heard as Kiba's face was implanted into the desk, complaining about how unfair everything was. Hinata grinned at that, happy to be on Naruto's side. Yugo Uzuki will be your Jonin sensei. Now, Team 7. Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha. After a moment and a glare from Iruka, the Chunin listed the last name of Team 7, which was a pasty-skinned boy named Sai. The Haruno girl, who was thrilled to be on Sasuke's team, let out a high-pitched screech that made everyone cover their ears. In Team 8, Kiba, Shino, and a young girl named Oichi Suru, the daughter of 2 shinobi who did not belong to a clan, were present. She wore a dark pink battle kimono that was cut above the knees, with mesh armor visible underneath, knee-length gray tabi socks, and dark purple kunoichi sandals. Her eyes were violet with a hint of sadness, and her long black hair appeared to have a violet tint in a Heim style. Because Team 9 was still in place, Team 10, which included Shikamaru, Shoji, and Inoa, as well as the platinum blonde girl she was stuck with, were viewed as losers. Iruka bowed slightly and said, now that the teams have been organized, I just wanted to wish you good luck on your careers as shinobi of Konoha. I hope you will succeed and bring honor to our village. Spend this time getting to know one another before your senseis arrive in 30 minutes. Greetings and best of luck. As the aspiring shinobi started chatting among themselves in their teams, Iruka left the classroom. Koka was receiving a lot of attention from the Hyuga heiress as she scratched behind the wolf's ears. So Shinri got up from her chair and went to her brother and Hinata, who were talking quietly. The other trio members were sleeping when Basho heard Shinri approaching and approached her. He grunted in satisfaction as he petted the wolf's head, and the girl grinned before moving on to the desk and speaking up. Would you mind if I joined? She asked, and both of them looked up. Naruto shook his head and motioned for her to sit down, but his expression was neutral. In the meantime, as he and the shinobi hopefuls selected senseis observed the students chatting among themselves, Minato grinned, primarily because his son had let his sister join in on the conversation. However, 2 of the senseis, Kurenai Yuhei and Kakashi Hitaki, were a little irritated because they were unable to obtain the students they desired. Kurenai wanted Hinata, while Kakashi wanted his sensei's children, and they argued with the Hokage about it. However, Minato informed them that this was his decision and that it was final. It didn't help that they didn't have them on their respective teams, but they were obviously relieved that Yugo was their sensei because they knew she would protect them and teach them correctly. Kurenai then turned her attention to Oichi, the young girl she was responsible for. It seems that Oichi's parents, who were well known for their prowess in Kenjutsu and Bojutsu, were killed a few years ago while on a mission for the village. The kunoichi, as she was known, was quite knowledgeable in medical jutsu and shuriken jutsu, but she kept herself low to avoid attention. Kurenai felt sorry for the girl and resolved to assist her in any way she could. After 30 minutes soon after the teams had gotten to know one another, the senseis started showing up to pick up their students. Naruto looked to the door when Team 6's sensei arrived, and he recognized Yugo almost immediately because of her purple hair and her Anbu clothing. The only thing missing was the Jonin flak vest. Knowing that his Oni, Chan, would serve as the sensei for his team made him smile. "Sixth team, come with me to Training Ground 6, Yugo called, and Naruto, Shinri, and Hinata rose to their feet. The Anbu level kunoichi smiled slightly at Naruto before continuing. The team left the academy classroom after their sensei nodded when the three young ninja with the wolves in tow fell in front of them. After landing, Yugo turned around and grinned at Naruto, after they had been on the ground for at least 10 minutes. She said, "Hey there, Naruto." Otouto and the blonde rushed forward to give the one woman who treated him like family a tackle hug. He said, "Hey Oni Chan." The former Anbu with the purple hair hugged him back. "Naruto, it's nice to see you again, but will you please let me now?" When she said, "Your sister and Hinata Sama are confused," Naruto blinked, turned around, and saw his two teammates staring at him bewildered. He instantly got back up and grinned sheepishly. "Sorry." Yugo simply kept grinning and said, "It's no problem, Otouto-kun." She saw the wolf trio sniffing at her and glancing at her inquisitively. My, aren't we the curious types?" After thanking Naruto, Yugo started introducing herself. Naruto sighed and whistled for them to return, which they did. She began by saying, "My name is Yugo Uzuki, former Anbu operative and now Jonin sensei of Team 6. I enjoy kenjutsu, moonwatching, my surrogate younger brother, and a certain someone I won't discuss with you." This caused Naruto to chuckle a little, but Yugo's slight glare silenced him as she went on. "I detest sexists, child abusers, rapists, and hypocrites." When she looked at them all, he grinned and said, "Now, in the same order I just did, state your name, likes, dislikes, and dreams for the future." "My dreams for the future are to marry that certain someone and train you three into great shinobi." Shinri was the first of the three genin hopefuls on Team 6 to speak, followed by Hinata and Naruto, who each gave their name, likes, dislikes, and future aspirations. Yugo was impressed by what she heard and nodded. Before her expression became serious, she said, "Good, very good. Now for you to know something. It's not the actual graduation exam that you took last week." The three blinked in surprise at this. The real test has a 60.6% failing rate, and only 3 or 4 teams would pass. She went on. "Now I won't tell what the test is, but I will give a little hint." Then she gave Naruto a direct look. She concluded with a wink, saying, "A house divided cannot stand." When Naruto realized what was happening, his eyes widened, but he smiled slightly. "I want to return at precisely 9:30 in the morning." The three of them nodded in agreement as she said, "Eat light, because if you do, you'll regret it." "All right, go home and get ready until then," she said, "Ya-ne," and vanished in a leaf shunshin. After dropping Hinata off at the Hyuga clan compute, the twins made the decision to walk with her to get to know her better before heading home. The two siblings washed and went to bed early to be ready for tomorrow morning after their mother prepared a hearty meal and they discussed who was on their team and who their sensei was. Ground of Training 6 The Konoha. After waking up at 7 a.m., eating a light breakfast, and doing some light training, Team 6 made it to the training ground before 8:45. The three wolves and the three humans were all anticipating their sensei. In the meantime, Hinata and the twins were all talking and paying some attention to the familiars. When 9:30 rolled around, Yugo showed up in a shunshin, and Naruto's familiars and the other three shinobi were startled to attention. Yugo nodded her head and grinned a little. She remarked, "Good, you're all alert," and then got right to work. From her ninja tool pouch, she took out a timer and 2 bells, setting the former on a tree stump. She held up the bells and said, "I've set the timer to go off at noon. You have till then to get these off of me. If you don't, you fail, and head straight back to the academy for another whole year." The three were tense after hearing that information, and none of them wanted to return to the academy. Naruto more than most because he was fed up with those fangirls. He was startled out of his reverie by Yugo's voice as she spoke once more. She smirked slightly as she said, "Now then. Your test begins," as her genin and the wolves all tensed. The three people and dogs then leapt into the trees and vanished in a blur. Yugo nodded in her head. sensing that they were doing a good job of concealing their chakra signatures. All right, let's wait for them to initiate contact. As Naruto gazed down at his Shan in a section of the trees, a plan began to take shape in his mind. As one of the triplets nuzzled him, causing him to pat the wolf's head, he thought to himself, there is no doubt about it, this test is all about teamwork. I need to locate the girls and persuade them to collaborate with me. I know Shinri still wants to win back my favor, and Hinata won't be an issue. After creating 2 clones and forming the hand signs for the cage bunshin, he grinned and gave Koka and Basho each one to go find the 2 kunoichi of Team 6, which the wolves and 2 clones dutifully did. All he had left was Koka. Kibo asked, now what? As Naruto grinned slightly. We wait now. Alongside Hinata squatting behind a bush, the Hyuga heiress gazed at her team's sensei, who was waiting calmly. With the exception of the wolves, there are only 2 bells and 3 of us, she reflected, and if we don't have a bell, one of us will return to the academy. Then, as she turned to see Basho and Naruto, she felt what she thought was a snout, interrupting her thoughts. Naruto shushed her before she could say anything more by putting a finger to his mouth. I'm only a shadow clone of the boss, Hinata. Chan, he stated, he sent to tell you that he knows how we can pass this test. At that, Hinata blinked, but she listened as the clone explained the original strategy. Alongside Shinri was listening to her brother's cage bunshin, who had just appeared, frightening her to no end and almost breaking his skull in the process, explain the original plan to him. Katatsume waited patiently beside her while the clone explained everything. She said softly, so, the secret to passing this test is teamwork? And the Naruto clone nodded. That's right. Konoha has always succeeded in its mission by having its shinobi work as a team, he replied. If we work together, we'll be able to pass. She looked out at Yugo and said, that sounds reasonable, with a smile. But, how are we able to get the bells from Yugo? Sensei. She's a former Anbu, right? Shinri asked. After nodding in agreement, Naruto remarked, yeah, but even an experienced kunoichi like Yugo.ne can be easily overwhelmed, before smiling slightly and saying, which is why we're going to try a little divide and conquer maneuver. Alongside Yugo patiently, the former Anbu agent waited for her students to take action. They will undoubtedly figure it out thanks to the hint she gave Naruto. The dire wolf trio then burst out of the bushes and headed straight for her, interrupting her thoughts. Here we go. As the 3 approached her directly, she prepared herself, she thought. The first to attack was Koka, who jumped at Yugo while baring her teeth. The swordswoman, however, retaliated by rolling aside and ducking. Nevertheless, she was able to land on her feet after Basho collided with her and sent her flying. The former Anbu winced as Katatsume then materialized behind her and clamped down on her leg. Suddenly, she heard the clacking of ninja sandals and turned to see Naruto, the girls, and the 2 other wolves speeding toward her. Quick thinking led her to retrieve a smoke bomb, which she hurled at Katatsume's head, startling him and causing him to release his grip. Then, as Yugo used the smoke to her advantage, she kept her potential students on her toes by using taijutsu rather than her sword to keep them at bay. I'm sorry if my action sequences are bad. You're going to have to do better than that, she stated. I was an Anbu operative for a reason. She spent a considerable amount of time sparring with the graduates and wolves, repeatedly hurling Naruto into trees, hitting Hinata with a few accurate blows, and exposing Shinri's head because Yugo was using the headhunter jutsu. To keep the wolves away, she had to, of course, kick, dodge, or use smoke bombs. Naturally, they also struck her a few times, including when Naruto nearly got the bells and lightly cut her with his wakizashi. Hinata struck her right arm with a jukin. Shinri nearly succeeded in entangling the purple-haired woman with her chakra chains. But before long, it was noon, and the buzzer sounded, alerting the ninja team that the game was over. She said, okay, that's enough, and turned to face the weary preteens. You both did well. But unfortunately you didn't get a bell, so. But then she saw that Naruto was grinning, and she blinked as he raised a pair of silver bells. What? She asked. Glancing back to see if it was a genjutsu, she saw that they were gone, leaving only the red string. How? Naruto started talking as the 2 younger girls grinned. The first smoke bomb that you used to hit Katatsume with was also the perfect cover for one of my clones to sneak in and cut the bells off. He clarified, the rest was just to keep you distracted before you noticed. In the end, Yugo could only smile despite her incredulity. She blinked in surprise when Naruto threw both bells to Hinata and his sister, saying, well done, but who are you going to give the other bell to, Naruto? If I go back to the academy, I can just the time to train more, said Naruto. And I can also teach the next class a few things most of the other instructors couldn't, or just lazy. Yugo was just shocked when she felt something suddenly in her hands and turned to face the two bells the girls had placed there. As the three wolves stood beside them, Shinri said, if Naruto.ni returns to the academy, then so do we. Hinata nodded in agreement and they took a step back with Naruto. After a few more blinks, Yugo grinned ruefully and exclaimed, then, as the future sensei of this squad, you passed. The three of them either cheered, grinned, or exhaled in relief. Congratulations you too, Yugo replied. You have the rest of the day off. Tomorrow we begin our first official day as Team 6. With a nod, the three preteens headed back to their homes, the wolves trailing behind. As Yugo watched her now, official team depart, she could only smile quietly. She whispered, well done, Naruto, before leaving to report her team's death. Office of the Hokage looking at the assembled group of Jonin. Senseis, Minato exclaimed. It seems we got a little better. So far we have 4 teams that passed. I guess modifying the curriculum really helped out a lot, he said. At that, the other Jonin gave a nod. Because they had been trained by their clans, the clan heirs were the ones who passed, though some ninjas who were born into the civilian world also passed. Yugao and Kakashi were the only ones absent. Talk about the devil, too, said Enbu emerged in a smoke cloud. Minato couldn't help but sigh in relief when she said, Hokage Sama, I'm pleased to report that Team 6 has passed their graduation test. They all proved they have the mentality to work as a team, and show much promise to be great shinobi. Minato knew his children had passed along with Hinata. I expect a full later on, he said with a grateful smile. That's good, Yugo. After Yugo gave a nod of approval, Kakashi showed up holding his signature book. He said sheepishly, Yo, I apologize for being late. I got lost on the road of life. Everyone, including Minato, started to perspire as a result. Asuma shook his head and asked, really Kakashi? That excuse is so old, nobody is using it anymore, he said. With a nervous smile, Kakashi scratched behind his head. As he delivered his report, Kakashi sighed and Minato asked, so Kakashi, how did they do? Well, let's just say it was a little chaotic at first, he stated. Sasuke, in Uchiha fashion, arrogantly tried to do it alone, leaving Sakura and Sai behind in the dust. Knowing that was to be expected of the Uchiha, who vowed to exact revenge on his clan, everyone sighed. They returned to hear Kakashi's next words. Sakura. He moaned slightly, don't even get me started. When the other Jonin believed they heard the word, fangirl, being muttered, they all blinked. Sai, on the other hand, he stated, he's got some interesting skills with Kenjutsu, and that ink ninjutsu of his. He was willing to work with the others as a team, but of course, he has a little trouble trying to socialize with the two. Minato arched an eyebrow, but he was advised not to ask by the expression in Kakashi's eye. I was about to fail them, but I gave them one last chance, he said. After I tied Sasuke up, I told Sakura and Sai not to feed him any food. But then, Sakura, followed closely by Sai, each gave him a piece of their food. Thus they were able to pass. Since Kakashi had failed every previous team, the Jonin were taken aback that he had managed to pass one. Knowing that the upcoming months would be busy, Minato sighed. The Yondaime said, from what you tell me, Kakashi, you got quite a lot of work on your hands, while Kakashi let out a sigh. No need to remind me, he replied, I can only hope with time, they'll be able to get along. Or do I have to get Kushina and Mikoto to show you what happens when you're late, every time? Minato then squinted his eyes and said, I hope you take your new job as a sensei seriously, Kakashi, in a low but firm tone. The memory of being repeatedly exposed to Kushina's wrath sent a chill down Kakashi's spine. Even though Mikoto wasn't as irritable, watch when she gets mad, awesome. He stumbled out, see. Crystal, Hokage. Sensei, which made the female Jonin, such as Kurenai and Yugo, smirk while some of the males felt sorry for him. And I wouldn't mind helping them, replied the swordswoman, especially if it gives me a chance to destroy those smut books of yours, that you are so fond of. Kami. Sama, help me, Kakashi said, instantly turning white as a ghost. He screamed in his head, but the deity could laugh at his situation. Alright, that's enough, Minato replied, you are all dismissed. Yugo, wait a moment. The other Jonin left, leaving the two of them alone in the office, and Yugo nodded while blinking. Yugo, I'm sure you can protect and train both of my children and Hinata with no trouble. he said, before sighing, but please, be there for Naruto. And I will also train Hinata and Shinri, the best I can. I won't favor one over the other, they're my overall responsibility, Yugao said with a stiff nod. I've been looking after him since he turned 4 Hokage. Sama, Minato said, winced. Yugao left the office right away after Minato nodded and said, good, I look forward to that, leaving Minato to sigh pitifully. Man. He replied, genjutsu or not, I've really fucked up. You can say that again, kid. After blinking, Minato turned to face the window, where he saw Jiraiya, the Toad Sannin, his teacher, standing with his arm folded. As Jiraiya moved deeper into the office, he asked, Sensei, when did you get back? Just now, he replied, I got a message that Naruto has returned, and was accompanied by 3 wolves of all things. Minato gave a nod. Yeah, and I can tell that they're not normal wolves either, said he, they were about the size of a regular wolf, but I have a feeling they're still pups. Minato nodded, and Jiraiya merely nodded. If that's true, they'll be mighty big when they get older, he said. He asked the Sannin, who leaned against the wall and sighed, so, what else do you come here to tell me? I've been hearing some whispers of a group of S-rank missing nin, he stated, however, I don't know what their goals are, but they had been taking high-rank missions from the highest bidders. Did you get the name of the group? Minato asked with a sigh, but Jiraiya shook his head. In response, Minato nodded. Nope. But my contacts are keeping a sharp ear for them, if they get any new info, they'll tell me, he said. All right, Minato said before glaring at Jiraiya. Sensei, I want you to check into what Danzo's doing as well, he said. After blinking at that, Jiraiya sighed and said, what did the mummy do now? His words caused Jiraiya's eyes to widen a little. We, and I mean myself, Kushina, and Hiruzen. Sama, all suspect of him being responsible for us neglecting Naruto, he said. He questioned, what makes you think that? Mizuki, a traitor and a former Chunin instructor, manipulated Shinri into stealing the Forbidden Scroll for information, he stated, which worried Jiraiya. He hinted that a crippled mummy was the one behind our neglect of him. Knowing that indicated the old Warhawk, Jiraiya tensed up. It's gonna be tough, Minato, Jiraiya said. Danzo is the type of guy to hide his tracks well. It'll be difficult to get proof that he was behind it. He said, just do what you can, and Minato nodded in agreement. Also, there's something else I need to tell you about Naruto, the Sannin said. Jiraiya listened intently, perking up. I believe that, somehow, he stated, Naruto has become a true Jinchuriki. 4 weeks following the team test the Konoha Tower of Hokage, Minato sighed as he carried out the tedious tasks associated with his role as Hokage. Yes, paperwork. He wished he hadn't accepted the role of Hokage during moments like these. Regretfully, Kami was giggling at his suffering. Once his mental episode was over, he recalled telling Jiraiya that Naruto possessed the innate qualities of a true Jinchuriki. It goes without saying that the Toad Sannin was taken aback by what he had been told. Rewind. The office was silent, and Jiraiya stood there staring at his favorite student as if he had grown a second head, his mouth hanging open and his eyes as big as saucers. Minato let out a small sigh as he said, I'm sorry Minato, I didn't quite get what you were saying. You want to run that by me again? You heard me right, Sensei, he replied. I believe that somewhere down the line, Naruto has somehow become a true Jinchuriki, rather than a pseudo-Jinchuriki. Especially if what Kushina said about the chakra he was exhuming when he was fighting Mizuki being colored green was any indication. What a minute did you say green chakra? Jiraiya asked, blinking, and Minato nodded. You're gonna have to ask Kushina about it since she saw it with her own eyes, he continued, and then grimly sighed, and we haven't gained enough trust for Naruto to tell us. Jiraiya instantly considered what his student had just told him and started giving it careful thought. This is something I never heard of before, the Sannin replied. If somehow, that Naruto became a Jinchuriki to something born out of the Kyuubi's chakra. If any of the other villages find out about this, they're gonna start sending spies to figure out what it is he's carrying. At that, Minato instantly went pale. Without a doubt, the village and his son would face difficulties if the other hidden villages discovered that the leaf had somehow obtained a potentially new Biju that was sealed in the Hokage's son. What'll I do then, Sensei? The Yondaime responded, I want to give Naruto some time, and let us take it slow until he trusts us again. But with this discovery, he'll need to be watched and protected just like Shinri. Jiraiya wasn't going to say anything when he touched the shoulder of his pupils. Just take it nice and easy, kid, he advised. The other villages don't know, yet, but before they do, just concentrate on leading the village and getting back in Naruto's good graces. I'll go and talk to Kushina about what you told me, then I'll stay for a little bit and then head back out and manage my spy network, drop by Mount Myoboku in the process. If it's anyone that knows this kind of stuff, it's the Elder Toads. The youngest Hokage was left to think alone after Minato nodded in favor of that plan and Jiraiya grinned before saying goodbye to his pupil. End of flashback. Minato then started designating one Anbu to keep an eye on Naruto, with the obvious directive to stay out of sight and far away so his son wouldn't notice. In addition, Naruto and his sister's team had already finished 25 D-ranked missions, 4 of which featured Tora, the daimyo's cat's wife, also referred to as the Devil Cat. For some odd reason, the cat would instantly calm down whenever Naruto caught Tora, even though it gave Shinri painful scratches when she attempted to capture the fierce animal. When Minato asked his son how he was doing for the 4th time, he shrugged and Naruto responded. He had remarked, "I just have a way with animals." He started to perspire at the thought. The object of his thoughts entered, interrupting his train of thought. Yugo handed him the 5D rank scrolls and said, "Missions accomplished, Hokage." Sama, adding, "We completed them quickly and efficiently." Minato nodded as he perused each scroll, indicating his agreement. The 3 genin all had little smiles on their faces as he said, "Good work, Team 6, and since you completed 30 D ranks, without a lot of hassle, you now qualify to do C rank missions," he said. Shinri was the most excited because they no longer had to perform the tasks they called D ranks. Naruto asked, "Excuse me, Hokage?" Sama and Minato listened, a little annoyed that Naruto hadn't called him too. Chan. "I was wondering, what if we put D ranks into the academy curriculum so that way, the academy will learn more teamwork and have a head start in missions?" Minato asked. Everyone blinked when Naruto spoke, taken aback by the sage counsel he had just offered. "That's not a bad idea, Naruto," Minato said, grinning at the wise counsel. "I think that would help out a lot," Minato added. Having been a mission giver outside of the academy, Iruka couldn't help but smile. Naruto knew he was going to be a great shinobi even though he had only been in the academy for a few months. Yugo, who was obviously proud of her surrogate little brother for suggesting such a thing, smiled subtly at his advice. When Shinri heard what her brother had told their father, she was shocked and a little jealous, but she also felt proud. Hinata smiled slightly, pleased that her crush was receiving recognition. "Well, if that is all, I will give you the details of the mission. You are to escort Tazuna, a bridge builder, of Nami no Kuni, back to his homeland, so he could complete the bridge he is building," he replied. "It's highly possible that he would be targeted by bandits on his way back home, and thus you need to be prepared while on the road." After the 3 genin gave a nod, Minato summoned the customer. The smell of alcohol hit Naruto like a sledgehammer as soon as the door opened, and he fought the urge to gag or recoil. However, unlike Naruto, the triplets actually sneezed to express how much they disliked the smell. Because he shared his senses with Naruto, Kibo was the same. "Ah crud. I hate the smell of alcohol. I'm sorry, Kibo, but please try to be patient." The young blonde turned to face the elderly man who entered through the door, and Naruto comforted him while the would.be9 tailed wolf simply nodded. "I'm omitting the part about his appearance because you all know it. I ask for ninja and all I get is a bunch of brats and 3 mutts," the visibly inebriated elderly man said, slurring his words slightly. As soon as he finished speaking, he gasped in agony as the wolf trio threw him to the ground and started snarling at the bridge builder, who was now suddenly sober and wearing a terrified expression. Yugo and Minato were only able to sigh at that. Anyone who insults the wolf trio is instantly jumped by them, and after receiving a good bite or scratch, they learn never to do it again. Naruto approached and looked down at the terrified man, saying, "You should not insult them. They are easily offended and will not hesitate to bite off your manhood if given the chance." Tazuna cried out in terror. "Whoa, okay, I take it back. Just call them off. I like what makes me a man to remain where it is, please." With a slight smirk on his face, Naruto simply nodded. "Good answer," he said, and was able to remove the bridge builder, with Koka snorting at him just for good measure. To combat the headache they were now experiencing, Minato, Iruka, and Yugo rubbed their temples and sighed. At the same time, they thought, "Oh boy. Tazuna.san, I advise against insults when regarding this team," Minato cautioned somewhat, "especially concerning the wolves you see before you. They will attack anyone who insults them, even if it's just a joke." Tazuna simply nodded and rose, hovering over his private area in a protective manner. "Don't worry, I understand perfectly crystal clear," he said, stuttering a little. In an attempt to soothe Koka, Naruto patted her head and nodded. The blonde Jinchuriki said, I'm glad you understand Tazuna-san. So, Yugo. Sensei, should we prepare for departure? The former Anbu merely shook her head and grinned. Only you, Naruto, she replied. Alright Team 6, go home and get whatever supplies and weapons that you need. Be at the gate at 0800 hours tomorrow morning. Before leaving the Hokage's office, the three genin and, predictably, the wolf trio nodded in agreement. The three wolves gave the elderly man a sidelong glance that caused the bridge builder to wince, and the canines, pleased with the outcome, went to reunite with Naruto. After thanking Tazuna, who left to go to the closest bar to soothe his agitated nerves, Minato could only sigh and think, I have a feeling this is going to be a long mission for them. At the Namikaze family home an hour later, Kushina was preparing dinner for her family, that is, the entire family in the kitchen of the Hokage family's house. She would always make sure Naruto had a proper place, and because she was paranoid, she would confirm that she had done so. By Kami, the now inactive Kunoichi, turned housewife vowed to never again do the same to her son and to commit seppuku before harming him once more. Her thoughts instantly shifted to Jiraiya's visit to the house, when it seems Minato informed him that Naruto might be a true Jinchuriki for reasons other than the Kyuubi's excess chakra. After she gave him the information, the perverted toad sage gave it some thought and told her that he would discuss it with the toads and get their interpretation. He also suggested that she keep a close watch on Naruto, just like she did on Shinri. That didn't bother Kushina, he was actually planning on it. However, it was a little challenging to speak with Naruto, who would give her a slightly uncomfortable expression when she spoke to him. She was aware that he had trouble trusting her, but that didn't lessen the amount of pain she was experiencing. The sound of a door opening interrupted her thoughts, and she saw her two children enter, along with the residential wolves who, in her opinion, are now members of the family. Shinri was smiling broadly, but it was not as wide as his sisters. Hey Ka-san. Shinri responded. Guess what? We got our first C-rank mission starting tomorrow morning. Kushina grinned, pleased for her two kids. Naruto tensed, but then relaxed, as she walked up to them and gave them a hug. That's good to hear, she said. I'm proud of both of you. Naruto nodded, and Shinri kept laughing. A small frown then appeared on the face of the matriarch of Uzumaki. However, I want you two to promise me this, she said with an even voice, that you both watch each other's backs and that of your teammate. A C rank is not as dangerous as the A and S rank missions, but things can change while outside the village. You get me? When the twins nodded their heads in comprehension, her smile reappeared. She said, I'm proud of you too though, with a few tears dripping from her eyes. When Naruto looked at his mother, he could see that she was making a concerted effort to avoid playing favorites in the future and to be a true mother going forward. Remembering the scars he had seen on her arms, he thought, at least she's getting better. I wouldn't want her to do another suicide attempt, he said. Yeah, and I still want to meet her, replied Kibo. Despite what happened during the days she forgot about you, she's a very interesting person. I just hope she accepts me. Given his knowledge of Kibo's desire to join a family, Naruto gave a small nod in response. He turned to his sister and nudged her, recalling what Yugo had told them. When he said, we better get our equipment ready for tomorrow, Shinri grinned and nodded. She said, right, and Kushina left them alone while they went upstairs to prepare everything they would need. She said, they both have grown up so fast, before going back to preparing the family's dinner. The Hyuga compound Hinata was in her room getting her pack ready for tomorrow's mission. She had already told her father the news, and in typical Hyuga fashion, she merely nodded while maintaining a chilly exterior. Hinata would typically be greatly impacted by her father's icy demeanor, but spending the last few weeks with Naruto and his sister has given her a significant boost in confidence. Additionally, Naruto received assistance from the wolves that followed him everywhere, particularly Basho, the wolf with the spot around his eye. When Naruto would console her when she was feeling low, Basho would be there right away to give her a warm lick or nuzzle. To be honest, she thought Basho was the best of the wolf trio. When Hinata heard a familiar voice ask, Oni-chan, she turned and gave her younger sister Hanabi a gentle smile. The relationship between the two sisters was tense at best prior to the incident where Naruto saved her from Kumo's second attempt at kidnapping, but it improved after she heard Naruto's words of encouragement and after she defeated her sister in additional matches. That was not the case for their cousin Neji, though. Hello, Hanabi-chan, she said, gesturing for the younger girl to stand next to her, which she did. How was your day? Hinata could only shake her head as Hanabi sighed slightly and said, it was fine, except for the part when Neji came home and started ranting about fate again. Neji has been impacted by the death of their uncle Hizashi, who was assigned to the branch house on a high-ranking mission. 1. He became resentful of the main house, especially of her and her empathy, and he would constantly talk about fate, destiny, and other such things. Hinata said, "Don't let it bother you too much, Hanabi-chan," as she softly stroked her sister's face. "You know Uncle Hizashi's death had a negative affect on him, and he feels that it was the main house's fault that he lost his father," Hinata said. Hanabi nodded. Although she hadn't had the opportunity to meet her uncle, she had heard that Hizashi never harbored resentment toward his older twin brother because he lived in the branch house and their father was in the main house. The backpack and the other random objects were then noticed by the younger sibling. She said, "Are you going somewhere?" And Hinata smiled. "Yes, my team and I have done enough D-rank missions to qualify for a C-rank mission, which will take us outside the village to Nami no Kuni," she replied. "I believe we should thank Naruto-kun for that, since he came up with the idea of using shadow clones to multiple missions at once. And considering his and Shinri-chan's chakra reserves, they can make a lot." Hanabi's eyes grew wide as he realized how many clones those two could create. "Sugoi!" she exclaimed, causing Hinata to chuckle. "Oh yes, a veritable sea of blonde and red hair running through the streets of Konoha doing all of those missions," she replied, "saves us time really to get the needed number of D ranks. However, the real Naruto-kun and Shinri stay with me and Yugo Sensei, so we could work on our teamwork and training." After nodding, Hanabi recalled how her sister had uttered Naruto's name, and a cunning grin came to her face. She said, "Speaking of the former, is he your boyfriend?" Hinata snapped her head in the direction of her younger sister, blushing tomato red, and eeped as she dropped her ninja tool bag, which was fortunately already closed. She screamed in shame, "Hanabi!" And Hanabi simply laughed at her sister's bad luck. She quickly felt regret, though, as her older sister started tickling her, which made her laugh more intensely and uncontrollably. Between her giggles, she exclaimed, "No. Ha ha ha. Chan, stop. Ha 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 ha. I'm sorry, please." However, Hinata persisted for an additional 5 minutes before ceasing, leaving the young girl gasping for air on the floor. "No. Fair," she uttered in between pants as Hinata completed packing her necessities. Saying, "That's what you get for embarrassing me," she zipped her pack and set it next to her bedside table. Before she sat herself back up, Hanabi managed to exhale, "Sorry, couldn't help it, but Naruto gave you more self-confidence, so there must be something between you, right?" For a moment, Hinata stood motionless, thinking about what her sister had said. She said, "Nothing is going on between us, Hanabi," but then she had the random idea, yet. The following day 7:50 a.m. at the gate, all three of Team 6 Genin were awaiting the arrival of their sensei and client. They checked their individual inventories during the 10 minutes they were early. Kushina prepared a bento lunch for Hinata, which she instructed her kids to give to the Hyuga when they next saw her, and she also gave one to Shinri and Naruto before they left the house. Then the three talked among themselves, and they all paid attention to the wolf trio. After 10 minutes, Yugo showed up, frowning disapprovingly and grabbing a certain bridge builder by the ear. She reprimanded him, "When I say we're leaving by 8 o'clock, I meant 8 o'clock, while the older man grunted in agony due to his severe hangover and ear pull. "I said I was sorry," he shouted, "now please let go of my ear, my hangover is bad enough." The three genin and wolves laughed at Tazuna's situation and found it amusing that the former Anbu was scolding the bridge. Only when they reached the team's destination did Yugo finally release the bridge builder's ear, causing the inebriated man to gently rub his ear while muttering about disrespectful brats and cranky kunoichi. She said, "All right, everyone ready? And good, then we shall begin Team 6 a first C-rank mission." The group all nodded. Then she turned to Naruto and told him to get some Kage Bunshin to act as scouts. He nodded and followed her instructions. Team 6 and their client then departed Konoha to start their journey to Nami no Kuni after the clones were removed. They won't be anticipating more trouble than a group of bandits, though, on their way to Nami.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.